81. Ultimate Magic, Perfect Resurrection. By the weekend, the Chamber of Secrets at Hogwarts had lost much of its usual gloom. Every available surface was crowded with magical instruments, experimental apparatus, and bottles of curious reagents. Near the entrance stood the Weasley twins' research bench, apparently chaotic, but full of odd inspiration. Closer to the silent statue of Slytherin, Roger's area was neat and efficient. He'd even borrowed tables, chairs, and shelves from the castle, turning the chamber into something that resembled a proper laboratory. Harry's scar had been throbbing lately. The Dark Lord's emotional barometer was unusually active, a sure sign Voldemort was plotting something in secret. Perhaps he had sensed trouble with his Horcruxes, or perhaps he had found another path back to life. After all, in the original story, he had unearthed that ancient ritual requiring the blood of a foe, the flesh of a servant, the bone of a parent. When Harry was in his 4th year, who could guarantee he would not discover yet another resurrection secret in the vast, obscure corners of magic? Dumbledore was feeling the pressure. The headmaster had been forced into an uneasy cooperation with Minister Fudge. Most Aurors stationed at Hogwarts had quietly been reassigned to covert missions. Roger didn't have to guess. Dumbledore was mobilizing every official resource to track Voldemort's slightest trace. Roger himself had been busy, spending long days in the chamber practicing advanced legilimency. The art's essence, he knew, was to dive into another mind to view, or even alter, memories. Unable to find a suitable living subject, he finally turned to the 1,000-year-old basilisk that had once belonged to Salazar Slytherin. Again and again, he sank his consciousness into the serpent's vast memory river. It felt like plunging into a deep sea, surrounded by drifting, shimmering fragments of the past. He saw himself discovering the basilisk, glimpsed the handsome young Tom Riddle opening the chamber, and even further back a hazy scene of another unknown wizard intruding here. Swimming ever nearer the source of those memories, he at last spied the legendary figure, Salazar Slytherin himself. In that ancient recollection, the black-robed, gray-bearded founder had just completed the hatching rite for the basilisk and was surveying the newborn monster with a calculating gaze. Through the serpent's compound eyes, Roger could feel that cold scrutiny. He tried to focus on the arcane details of the ritual, but the Slytherin in the memory abruptly whipped out his wand. "Aha! A distant peeping Tom? I've caught you!" the man in the memory cried. A weird violet light burst from the wand tip, stabbing at the basilisk's eyes, yet it felt as though it pierced time and space, an invisible magical hand riffling through Roger's consciousness. He realized at once that if that light touched him, his mind would be trapped here forever, imprisoned inside an eternal memory. Roger struggled to withdraw, but the surrounding fragments solidified and twisted together like many tough chains, binding and dragging his mind deeper. His retreat slowed to desperation. The violet light was about to swallow him. "Roger!" A clear shout yanked him violently back to reality. He shuddered, eyes refocusing on the basilisk's tightly closed lids. Turning, he saw Fred's concerned face. Fred had come in after noticing Roger sitting motionless for too long. Cold sweat soaked Roger's back. Without Fred's timely arrival, he would already have been lost in that perilous sea of memory. What chilled him even more was that the Slytherin in the memory had not felt like a mere recollection. The reactions, the aggression, the attempt to fend off an intruder, those were the behaviors of a living will. What exactly was it? Voldemort had once said that after death, a person's will and soul diffuse into every corner of the world, but Roger was learning something deeper. Perhaps will and soul also seep into memory itself. The more memories remain, the more concentrated the residual will become after death. As long as memories of someone exist, that person is not truly gone. Real death, perhaps, is to be utterly forgotten. If memories could be altered, if a wizard could twist the memories stored across creatures to concentrate a will, then could that concentrated will reverse death and restore life? Within the framework of voluntarism, the thought made perfect sense. Roger felt he was on the verge of the ultimate magic of voluntarism, perfect resurrection. He pushed down the turbulent thoughts, transformed the basilisk into an Ouroboros bracelet, slipped it round his wrist, and left the chamber. In the corridor, he noticed far more Aurors than usual. Each carried a parchment sheet, apparently a new product from Malfoy Alchemy Workshop called the Quick Write Charm, designed for instant written communication. Roger calculated that the ministry's demand for such items must be huge, which confirmed the market potential of his own double vision spectacles. No wonder Diagon Alley alchemy shops were scrambling for exclusive sales rights. "So here you are, Roger," a deliberately hearty voice rang out. Before he could turn, a hand clapped familiarly on his shoulder. He looked up to see none other than Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge himself. Fudge had come to Hogwarts ostensibly to inspect progress on the hunt for Sirius Black, but in truth to see Roger. Rita Skeeter's exclusive had done wonders. With flowery prose, she had painted the image of a kindly, brilliant, research-obsessed prodigy. More importantly, in the interview, Roger had specifically mentioned the Nicholas LeMay Manor robbery, thanking the ministry for its swift actions and praising the Auror office's professionalism under Fudge's leadership. He had expressed confidence that under the minister's wise guidance, Sirius Black would soon be captured. That bit of flattery had gone a long way to steadying public opinion and bolstering Fudge's precarious position. Fudge half led, half embraced Roger toward the castle gardens. Seeing the students thin out, he signaled the accompanying Aurors to step away. "Sit, my boy," he said, indicating a stone bench. He took off his fine wool coat and tossed it aside, settling down with a relieved air. His aides had tactfully retreated out of earshot. "Roger, I believe you know me. We met in the courtroom." A trace of embarrassment flickered across the minister's face as he tried for an easy tone. "I never imagined Dolores would do something so despicable, betraying my trust completely. Fortunately, you saved the day, or the consequences would have been unimaginable. But that's all in the past, isn't it? I read that interview. You did excellently." Roger sneered inwardly, but showed nothing. He'd kept his guard up during the interview. Rita Skeeter was notorious for fabrication. Roger had used legilimency on Skeeter and had seen plenty, including the real source of the 50,000 galleon interview fee. He had also seen the Daily Prophet's scheme to squeeze every last drop of news value from both him and Fudge. They'd taken the money themselves and demanded the article be written to their advantage, intending to play both sides. It was a suicidal act of double dealing. Roger had unceremoniously extracted that memory and stored it in a memory sphere. At the same time, an idea had formed. Perhaps this conspiracy involving the Prophet could be turned into another fortune. With that thought in mind, Roger finally spoke. "Respectable Minister, I fear your optimism may be premature." 82 Wizard Daily. When Roger told him the news, Fudge's eyes went wide with disbelief. The Daily Prophet had stabbed him in the back. He had just doubled their subsidy and even reimbursed them for an exclusive interview, and Barnabas Cuff, that slippery old fox, had played both sides. "Well done, Roger. This is clearly a political conspiracy against me, and you've been caught in the crossfire." Fudge's face was livid. He spat the words through clenched teeth. He knew that if Roger hadn't tipped him off, Cuffy's revelation might have cost him his job. Roger had, without question, just saved his skin. A political conspiracy? Roger let a puzzled look cross his face at exactly the right moment. "Oh, my dear boy, politics is a filthy game." Fudge indulged him with a rare patience, explaining at length he clearly wanted to recruit the newly decorated Order of Merlin recipient to his side. The wizarding world, Fudge explained, was broadly split. On one side were the pure-blood hardliners, Lord Voldemort and the Death Eaters, backed by the so-called sacred families, Malfoy, Lestrange, Black, and other powerful wizards. They pushed a hard line against Muggles, enjoyed a significant following, and when Muggle power threatened wizarding survival, they dominated public opinion and pushed for strict policies to defend the magical world. That tendency had been especially strong in the Middle Ages and the early 20th century. On the other side were those who favored cooperation with Muggles, led in spirit by Dumbledore and supported by families like the Weasleys, the Prewetts, the Potters, and a large number of Muggle-born wizards. They sought friendship, closer ties, and integration for Muggle-borns, and their influence had grown as the Muggle world advanced. Fudge put himself in a middle position, a half-blood dove who also represented pragmatic, pure-blood commercial interests. Men like Macmillan and Bones and the owners of large firms like Fletwick and Barks. They favored goodwill toward Muggles and were willing to accept Muggle-borns. After all, a larger wizarding population meant a larger market, but they wanted to keep a comfortable distance. Limited cooperation, strict isolation was their motto. Enough contact for trade and stability, but nothing that would alter the status quo. After the trauma of the First Wizarding War, both purebloods and half-bloods craved peace. Stability, Fudge said, was the overriding demand. That dovish half-blood view underpinned Fudge's rule. It explained his suppression of Dumbledore to some extent. Mainstream opinion preferred neither radical hawks who would scorch bridges with the Muggle world, nor extremes that would shatter a balance most people found tolerable. To Fudge, Roger, a Muggle-born, eager to help soften public opinion, and obsessed with alchemy, looked like a potential ally, a moderate unlikely to be as radical as Dumbledore. The fact that the major factions checked and undermined each other, Fudge added, gave newspapers like the Daily Prophet room to maneuver. Papers held explosive material on every side, sold to the highest bidder, danced between camps, and turned that information into profit. "Mark my words," he muttered, thumping his knee. "Someone's probably already put a price on my head." Roger understood instantly. If the Daily Prophet could sell information, then the memory he possessed, proof that Rita Skeeter was an illegal animagus and evidence of a plot against Fudge, would be valuable too. When Roger set the memory vial and the bombshell news before the minister, a light flashed in Fudge's eyes. Without hesitation, he wrote a check for 50,000 galleons. Clutching the vial, Fudge was ecstatic. The trip to Hogwarts had paid off. He'd won over a promising young wizard and secured hard evidence of a conspiracy. 50,000 galleons, he told himself, was a legitimate security expense, money the Minister of Magic spent to safeguard peace and stability. Besides, it went on the ministry's books. Spend the ministry's money, do the ministry's work, secure one's own position, perfectly justified. That, he thought, was part of being Minister for Magic. Before they parted, the pleasant cooperation had raised Fudge's trust in Roger even further. He eagerly bought a pair of Roger's double-vision spectacles at a high price. Dumbledore had mentioned the device, and Fudge found it highly useful. The spectacles allowed him to communicate in real time with both Dumbledore and Roger. On the spot, he promised that once the product officially launched, the ministry would give it priority procurement. Fudge's counterstrike, however, arrived from an unexpected quarter, and it was swift. The long-established Malfoy Alchemy Workshop released a new product, the much-rumored Quick-Write Charm. At the same time, the Malfoys founded the Wizarding Daily, distributing it via the Quick-Write Charm. The wizarding world had no shortage of papers, but most were tiny, losing propositions with print runs under 1,000. No one threatened the Daily Prophet's monopoly until now. The Wizarding Daily's first Quick-Write delivery carried a screaming headline: Rita Skeeter was an illegal animagus. Issue after issue, the new paper dissected Rita's articles, accusing the Daily Prophet of using an illegal animagus and other criminal methods to steal news, painting the venerable paper as a criminal organization. While the country reeled, the ministry acted. Fudge ordered agents to arrest Rita Skeeter at once, hauled in the Daily Prophet's staff for investigation on charges of illegal activity, and sealed the newspaper's offices. The most authoritative medium in the British magical world had been temporarily shut down. Which paper, then, would people trust? The one that had exposed the Daily Prophet's crimes and enjoyed the ministry's backing, the Wizarding Daily. Lucius Malfoy leapt into the position of media mogul who controlled public opinion. And yet, as Lucius Malfoy's star rose, he quietly appeared one evening below Dolores Umbridge's house, accompanied by Quirrell and a man named Joel. 83. The final link in the Plan 19, Avery Street, northeast London, sat in one of the city's most celebrated garden districts, where green hedges and riotous flower beds marched to the horizon. It was the home of Dolores Umbridge, former senior undersecretary to the minister and now the head of the Portkey office in the Department of Magical Transportation. Demoted 3 ranks to a post far less powerful than the Flu Network Authority or the Broom Regulatory Control Board, Umbridge, who craved authority the way bees crave nectar, felt as though life itself had been drained out of her. Losing power was like a tree losing rain, a bee losing blossoms. Worse, Since bungling that last tribunal, her standing at the ministry had become precarious. Friendless and branded culpable, colleagues avoided her as if she carried contagion. Her door had been unnervingly quiet for weeks. A soft crack echoed along Avery Street, and 3 figures popped into existence. Had she looked, Umbridge would have recognized one as Lucius Malfoy, newly flaunting his wealth as a business magnate. The other 2 were the chief culprits in the Nicholas LeMay Manor robbery, the wanted Professor Quirrell and Joel Shafiq. But at that moment, the famously haughty tycoon was following Quirrell with his head bowed, an almost grotesque deference. "Master, please forgive me," Quirrell stammered. His face was webbed with deep wrinkles no man his age should have. The Horcrux inside him galled his body, aging him day by day. "When do we strike?" The answer did not come from Lucius or Joel, but from a voice that sounded detached and cold, as if it rose from Quirrell's own bones. "At least a month, no more than 2. We will not move before the Christmas holiday." "Christmas, Master?" Quirrell's insistence made the timetable stretch beyond his patience. "Forgive my stupidity, but why wait? We already have Harry's trust." "Fool," the voice cut like frost. "Every pupil will go home for the holiday. The Aurors left to guard Hogwarts will be few, and even the Dementors patrolling Hogsmeade will be pulled. No one wants those monsters near Christmas. The merchants of Hogsmeade won't allow it." An uneasy silence followed. Quirrell found his courage again. But Master, why must it be Harry Potter? Extracting him from Hogwarts is so difficult, so time-consuming." This silence was longer, heavier. "That is not your concern," the voice hissed, glacial and absolute. "Master, I'm not questioning the task," Quirrell blurted, panic leaping into his voice. "I only meant, perhaps we could use another wizard? Old or young, we could find them quickly and finish at once, so you may return sooner, even if we need many, one night, a few hours." "We shall certainly need other wizards," Lord Voldemort replied, each word a shard of ice. "Their will shall amplify the resurrection spell." He tilted Quirrell's head slightly toward Joel. "Joel, to bring back your wife will require the combined will of 100 wizards, a magic I have secured for you. With loyal servants I keep my word." A feverish flush lit Joel's face. He said nothing but bowed, almost reverent. "Yes, I can manage that," Quirrell said, relieved. "But taking Harry is so hard. He's guarded day and night, and then there's that Roger. Wormtail reports Potter practices spells with Roger every day, bent on avenging Black. If Roger learns of our plan, tell Wormtail to keep away from Roger." Voldemort's voice carried rare alarm. "Under no circumstances is he to provoke that boy. I will not have him meddling again." After a moment, Voldemort added, "I shall give Wormtail a charm to cloud Roger's perception, to make him overlook much." "As you command, Master." Quirrell bowed hastily, then pressed on. "But surely we could abandon Potter and choose someone else, so you might return sooner." "I begin to think," Voldemort hissed, dangerous as a coiled viper, "that you weary of serving me, of bearing me within you." "No, Master, never," Quirrell babbled, terrified. "I am loyal to the end. Heaven and earth bear witness." "Do not lie to me." The voice spiked, then fell to a terrifying, emotionless calm. "I know every thought inside your skull. You sought me out by calculation, and now you judge the cost too high. You even doubt I can ever return, convinced I am forever powerless." While Quirrell stammered frantic, broken protests, the 3 reached number 19. In an instant, Voldemort seized control. Quirrell's mouth snapped shut. "Subdue Umbridge. We need her portkeys. She is the final piece," Voldemort commanded through Quirrell's lips. "Go." Umbridge's house was a modest 3-story townhouse. Few extension charms had been cast, so each floor was small but cozy. Her taste was intensely, almost pathologically, girlish, the rooms overflowing with gaudy lace and innumerable ornamental cats. She tossed sleepless in the night, the loss of power still eating at her like poison despite Fudge's leniency. "Who's there?" she barked, sitting upright to find 2 figures in her bedroom. A Slytherin graduate of Hogwarts, she was no mediocrity. In one smooth motion, she snatched the wand she kept beneath her pillow and leveled it at the intruders. "Lucius?" she exclaimed as one man stepped from the shadows. She had expected some petty thief or roaming dark wizard, not Lucius Malfoy. "Good evening, Undersecretary. Pardon, Director Umbridge," Lucius drawled, offering a mocking little bow with his wand. His use of the title director dripped with derision. A second figure moved forward. Umbridge needed no second glance to recognize Joel Shafiq, once steward to Nicholas LeMay and now notorious for the manor raid. Realizing they meant her harm, she fired first. Two brilliant red jets of Expelliarmus lanced toward them. They were ready and dodged nimbly. Joel answered almost before he landed. Imperio, a thick, sickly green beam burst forth and struck Dolores Umbridge squarely. 84. Magic Duel Hogwarts, Chamber of Secrets. The chamber was unusually lively today. Fred, George, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, even Wayne and Hannah had come. It all started when Professor Lockhart announced the opening of a dueling club to get everyone practicing spells. The group, calling themselves the Hogwarts Legacy, sprang back into action and began training hard. Their instructor, Roger, however, had been holed up in the chamber every day working on his research. Eventually, worn down by everyone's pestering, he moved the club's practice space straight to the chamber. As they walked down beneath the castle and stepped into the legendary chamber, everyone went silent with awe. The place was spectacular. Serpentine stone pillars loomed, and through massive grim shadows, the air smelled of ancient dust and old magic, cold and mysterious. They were even more stunned that Roger and the Weasley twins had somehow established such an unbelievable secret base here. No wonder Roger had hardly been seen in the library all year. "Fred, George," Ron gaped around, half angry, half betrayed. "You've been keeping this from me. Am I even your brother anymore?" "Dear little Ronnie, this isn't our turf," Fred said, nodding mysteriously off to the side and lowering his voice. "And remember, there's a caretaker here. See that big thing coiled up over there? If you're interested, you can go see how negotiations go." Ron turned and saw the basilisk, majestic and terrifying, even asleep. He recalled Roger's ferocious form when he'd transformed in the court and swallowed hard, quickly shutting up. While the others seized the rare chance to practice together, Harry had already been training obsessively for over half a month. Whenever he learned a new spell, he wanted Roger's guidance immediately. Roger, watching Harry, had also gained new insights. Observing Harry had reinforced his belief in a theory he called voluntarism. From Roger's perspective, Harry was unquestionably gifted. No matter the circumstance, he carried an unshakable conviction that he would succeed in casting a spell, a quality Dumbledore prized in a top-tier wizard. According to voluntarism, magic springs from the will. Its strength and purity determine the power and effect of a spell. Pronunciation, gestures, even emotion are tools to focus and release that will. Harry threw himself into practice with iron determination, never stopping until he achieved perfection. Failures didn't discourage him. He picked himself up and tried again. With such steadfast perseverance and unyielding self-belief, successful casting became inevitable. Even when his wand work or words were imperfect, his will often compensated. This trait had carried him through the worst of times in the original story. He had rushed Lord Voldemort-possessed Quirrell without fear in his first year. In his second, after being bitten by the basilisk and nearly poisoned to death, he still drove the Fang into the Diary. In his fourth year, he had stood alone in the graveyard and dueled the returning Voldemort. In his seventh, knowing he might be the sacrifice needed to destroy Voldemort, he had walked into the Forbidden Forest without flinching. Dumbledore valued Harry for a reason. Whether in magical theory or personal quality, Harry had enormous potential. Even without Lily's sacrificial protection, he would have become a formidable opponent to Voldemort. "Roger, come duel me," Harry shouted, having smashed the practice target in front of him with another blasting curse, but still feeling unsatisfied. He strode over to Roger, who was bent over a workbench, and challenged him. "Why?" Roger asked, looking up from a magical ring he had been studying. Roger's magic rested on what he called soul theory. Whether his self-created polymorphic transformations, magical creature metamorphoses, duplication charms, or the harsher soul-sapping curses, the core stemmed from his understanding of the soul and its manipulation. After taming the chamber's basilisk and mastering some of its mysteries, Roger had tried to extract innate abilities from those ancient creatures and integrate them into modern spells and alchemy. The basilisk offered a wealth of potential. Its eyes carried lethal, petrifying magic. Its venom could corrode the soul, one of the few substances that might destroy a Horcrux. But what Roger valued most for now was the creature's incredible natural defense. The scales acted like armor, resisting most conventional spells and physical attacks. Roger needed better protection. He had no effective defense against powerful dark magics like fiendfire. After studying the basilisk's defensive mechanisms, he isolated the core magical patterns and used them to improve the shield charm. He created the new serpent scale armor charm and prepared to bind it permanently to a magical ring. Having recently come into 10,000 galleons, he spent it all on top-tier materials to upgrade the ring into automatic protective alchemical equipment. They're all too weak. I need a real opponent. Harry's voice was firm, his wand hand steady. Roger guessed Harry had heard about Sirius Black's escape and had already identified the man as the traitor responsible for his parents' doom. That ruthless urge for revenge explained Harry's eagerness. It was also the perfect chance to test the ring's protection. They went to the clearing at the center of the chamber. The others moved to the edges to watch. "Go all out. Don't hold back," Roger said, calm and confident. Harry hesitated only a beat. He had seen Roger face a remnant of Voldemort and knew the youngest recipient of the Order of Merlin spoke with authority. Just as he raised his wand, Roger called out, "And the rest of you, come at me together." "What?" The little wizards looked at each other, surprised. "You said it!" Ron shouted, grinning, and whipped out his wand with eager anticipation. Harry was fast. Almost the instant his wand rose, he fired. Expelliarmus! A brilliant red bolt shot toward Roger. Instead of dodging or blocking, Roger stood as if he intended to take the hit. A low chorus of gasps rippled through the chamber. When the spell struck Roger, it hit like a quaffle against stone, deflected with a dull thud, and slamming back into Ron beside him. Ron's wand flew from his hand as if an invisible force had poked it, arced through the air, and landed on the far floor. "My wand!" he cried, running to retrieve it. The wand was nearly snapped in two. The top half dangled, held on only by splinters. Then everyone attacked at once. Spells red, blue, green rained toward Roger like a torrent. Roger didn't attack. He just defended, calmly testing his new charm. One by one, the spells were precisely deflected, scattering in all directions and forcing the attackers to tumble out of the way. By the time they were exhausted, Roger's charm still shone, showing no sign of weakening. The serpent scale armor charm's defensive strength far exceeded a normal shield charm. There was a problem, though. The deflected spells could injure his friends. After the duel, Roger returned to his bench and added a tracking correction enchantment to the ring. Now, if a spell were deflected, it would reverse precisely along its original path and strike the caster rather than scattering randomly. That way, unless someone like Dumbledore, Voldemort, or Grindelwald attacked him, it would be extremely difficult for an ordinary wizard to break through Roger's protection. That evening at 8, the little wizards gathered in the Great Hall. The long dining tables had been cleared and replaced with a gilded stage set against the wall. Hundreds of candles floated above, lighting the stage as bright as day, while the ceiling again reflected the night sky. Nearly the entire school had come. The hall was packed. Students gripped their wands, faces alive with excitement. "Hey, I heard Professor Flitwick was a dueling champion when he was young." Ron squeezed through the crowd, gesturing with his half-broken wand. "I wonder if he'll show up." "Professor Lockhart will definitely be here. He's the host," Harry said, excited at the thought of seeing Lockhart's practical dueling skills. The thrilling tales in Lockhart's books about battling yetis, werewolves, and vampires had raised Harry's expectations. "But can those tricks handle you-know-who?" Ron muttered, doubtfully. Hermione, overhearing and affronted on Lockhart's behalf, snapped at Ron for belittling her idol. Sure enough, Lockhart arrived on stage in his trademark violet robes, all smiles. He raised a hand and silence fell. After that dramatic Defense Against the Dark Arts class, particularly the demonstration involving the Unforgivable Curses, no one was eager to question the professor's authority anymore. What the crowd didn't see was that his master had sent instructions. Joel had ordered him to avoid attracting Roger's suspicion and had sent a charm with a powerful confundus attached, with instructions to use it on Roger when the chance arose. Lockhart had little respect for the plan. He thought it unnecessary, but the opportunity was too convenient to pass up. Harry trusted him completely. Lockhart knew several secret passages out of the school and could use a portkey at the Shrieking Shack to send Harry to the North Sea and into the Dark Lord's hands, as long as his identity remained hidden. He had no intention of exposing himself, and figured dealing with a kid who knew only a bit of transfiguration would be easy. Even so, the order was clear, and Lockhart, loyal to his masters, finally decided to carry it out. This dueling club was perfect for slipping in the Confundus charm, an opportunity he could not resist. 85. What was the mission again? Hogwarts Great Hall. Gather round, children. Come closer. Gilderoy Lockhart stood in the center of the hall, his voice booming like a stage announcer's. Let me see you. Ah, excellent. Some of you may not know much about formal wizarding duels, but never fear. You're in luck. You have an experienced professor here, namely me. His gaze swept the students like a spotlight and settled on Roger. A broad, practiced smile spread across his face. Roger, yes you. Come up to the stage and assist your professor with a little demonstration. Don't worry, I'll be very, very gentle. He winked, flashing his pearly teeth. Roger raised an eyebrow in surprise, then thought better of it. This would be a good chance to test the upgraded magic ring disguised on his finger. I'll be your assistant, Professor Snape said quietly, crossing his arms. His black robes hung perfectly even without wind. As a master of potions and a powerful wizard, Snape knew that the ability to cast an unforgivable curse meant little by itself. Any powerful adult could throw raw magic around. True skill showed in control and mastery of advanced techniques. In Snape's view, Lockhart was all peacock feathers and a few flashy tricks, annoyingly so. Lockhart's smile faltered at Snape's interruption. Severus, I think we should let the youngsters have more chances to practice, he stammered. Is that so? Snape's mouth tilted into a thin, false smile. His voice was smooth. Then consider this an opportunity. Lockhart missed the irony entirely and mistook the remark for worry that he might be too forceful. He hurried to reassure. Don't worry, I have an excellent sense of proportion. This is merely a demonstration, purely for show, no danger at all. He stepped up and faced Roger. They exchanged a symbolic bow. As everyone can see, this is simply a demonstration. Let's walk through the procedure. Lockhart announced to the hushed crowd, smiling brightly. The two raised their wands to their chests like dueling swords. From this moment, the duel officially begins. On the count of 3, we'll make a move. Of course, nothing will really happen. It's all demonstration. As he spoke, Lockhart flicked his wand and cast silently. A nonverbal spell, an advanced technique, often used to surprise an opponent, shot from his wand in a blinding red streak, like a swift lunging snake. Most of the children watched relaxed, assuming theatrics. Only Snape's eyes narrowed. There was a weight to that spell that wasn't mere show. Roger, assuming it was all for show, didn't prepare to defend. The red light hurtled toward him. The small ring on Roger's finger flashed faintly. The spell struck the ring, and rather than hitting Roger, it was reflected back along its path. Before Lockhart's smile had time to fully form, he was struck by his own charm. He toppled backward like a marionette with cut strings, slammed into the wall, and slid to the floor in a curled, dazed heap. A collective gasp rolled through the great hall. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Wayne exchanged no surprised looks. They had long since seen Roger's unusual abilities. Is he all right? Hermione whispered, worried. He'll be fine. It was just a demonstration charm, Ron said, shrugging. Professor! Harry was already at Lockhart's side, offering a hand. Lockhart, who had taught him privately and spun tales about Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew, was someone Harry felt oddly protective toward. Thank you, Harry. I'm fine, just a bit dizzy, Lockhart managed, pushing himself up. His hat had fallen, his once perfect curls stuck out in several directions. He looked toward Roger across the stage, shock and a rising panic in his eyes. He had failed? That boy must be wearing some powerful alchemical defensive device. This complicates everything. The master's task won't be easy to complete. What was the task again? Capture Roger and bring him back. But if Roger had that protection, how could he be captured? He couldn't just bring back Harry. No, that would infuriate his master. The thought of the master's methods made Lockhart tremble. He had to find a way to complete the mission. He had to bring Roger back. December had brought 2 epoch-making products to the wizarding world. One was the quick right charm sweeping Diagon Alley. The other, Wiseacre's newly released double vision spectacles. A huge crowd surged in front of the Malfoy Alchemy Workshop. For 26 galleons, buyers could own a quick right charm and a permanent subscription to the popular The Wizarding Daily, an irresistible offer. The charm eliminated printing and paper costs, promising to expand the paper's readership as it spread. On the workshop's second floor, two figures leaned against the railing, looking down at the bustling crowd. In the deeper shadow of a corner where the sun couldn't reach, Professor Quirrell stood with something attached to him. Silent, unseen by the crowd, the voice that echoed from the shadow was cold, hoarse, and unmistakable. "Lucius, any word from Wormtail?" the voice asked. Lucius Malfoy stood by the window, trying to keep his composure at the spectacle below. He replied with the respectful tone he reserved for power. "He has sent word, Master. He promises the task will be completed." "Very good." The voice regarded the workshop with slow attention. "And Joel? Any progress with those reclusive wizards?" Lucius's voice took on a quick edge of unease. "Master, Joel reports they are ignorant, refuse to believe in the vision of the new world you offered. No agreement could be reached." Instead of the rage Lucius had expected, a cold, brittle cackle echoed from the shadow, laced with sarcasm and thin fury. "In that case," the voice said, "prepare 20,000 muggles for me. I will let those short-sighted fools see with their own eyes how muggles should be put to good use. I will also let you, Joel, and Quirinus," a pause, savoring the words, "step onto the path to demigodhood." The thing within Quirrell stirred, eager and triumphant. The voice continued, hollow and burning. "Quirinus, haven't you complained that loyalty has gone unrewarded? This time I will grant you the power you dreamed of. Together we will build a new world, a perfect world belonging to wizards. This will be our greatest undertaking." On the first day of the Christmas holiday, the Minister for Magic's office was already packed. The room held the most powerful figures in the ministry. The heads of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, the head of the Public Information Office, the minister's advisor, the senior undersecretary, and their aides. An unusual tension hung over them all. Whatever was about to be discussed was no small matter. Cornelius Fudge burst in with a bang, slamming the door. His face was so dark with worry it looked almost wet. He was in a terrible mood. After months of turmoil, he had clawed back some stability. An uneasy alliance with Dumbledore, Roger's unexpected public support, and a forceful crackdown on the Daily Prophet had steadied him somewhat. Sending extra Aurors and Dementors to guard Hogwarts had appeared to pay off. Since the Halloween attack, Sirius Black had indeed vanished and caused no further trouble. Fudge had assumed that, with a bounty of 20,000 galleons, Black would soon be caught. Then this new, appalling incident had happened, and this time it hadn't taken place at Hogwarts. In Aberdeenshire, an entire town of Muggles had vanished overnight, 20,000 people taken. Hundreds who tried to resist had been slaughtered with the killing curse, felled by a single bolt. Wizards were obviously responsible. Worse, the crime scene was not far from Hogwarts. A terrifying thought pounded behind Fudge's temples. Could this be the work of that remaining Black? If a manhunt that had tied up almost all ministry resources could still permit such a bold atrocity, it would be a devastating rebuke. He shoved himself down into his chair and barked the name of the head of the Auror office. "Kingsley Shacklebolt. Report." Kingsley, a member of the Sacred 28 and an experienced Auror who secretly guarded the Muggle Prime Minister and served the Order of the Phoenix, had been promoted to Scrimgeour's old post. He spoke in a deep, steady voice. When he finished, a collective gasp rippled through the room. "More than 20,000 Muggles were taken," Kingsley said. "At least a dozen attackers were seen by a passing witch. None of them are in our records. They're new faces. Their methods were ruthless. Hundreds were killed instantly. Killing curses, no warning. We have no idea where they've been taken or why. Most of our forces are tied up at Hogwarts. Right now, there are no useful leads." Fudge had no doubt Kingsley was doing all he could. Still, panic flared in the room. "Public Information Office," Fudge ordered, trying to seize control. "We must control the news. We cannot allow a greater panic. Notify every paper and magazine that, effective immediately, all articles must be reviewed by the ministry before publication. Any objections? The head of the Public Information Office looked stricken. Minister, it's too late. The witness used double-vision spectacles to record part of what she saw, and the footage has already been circulated. Then order Wiseacre's wizarding equipment to disable that function and ban any further dissemination of the footage at once. Fudge snapped, eyes flicking automatically to the fireplace. He had asked Dumbledore to come and desperately needed his help. Dumbledore was late. "I'm afraid that isn't possible," came a timid voice from the head of the improper use of magic office. "Not possible?" Fudge wheeled on him. The man shrank under the minister's glare. "Yes, minister," the head stammered. "Using a mirror of Airicid or similar devices to record and transmit images does not, as written, contravene any explicit clause in the International Statute of Secrecy. We can't just order the function disabled without a legal basis." Fudge felt a hot, incredulous laugh rise in him. Since when had the ministry's law enforcers been reduced to parsing statutes while London burned? Then he remembered the cost of his earlier maneuvering. Dolores Umbridge had been sacrificed during the hearings against Dumbledore, and many ministry officials had grown timid and fearful of overstepping their bounds. This timidity, this political price, was why he now faced bureaucratic resistance. If this footage spread unchecked, all he had worked to stabilize could collapse. The returned fury of the Daily Prophet and its backers, eager both for revenge and profit, would drown him in scandal. He could already see the headlines: Cornelius Fudge, crisis manager or crisis creator. Attacks continue. When will the minister keep us safe? Disaster follows the minister like a shadow. Our greatest mistake, tying the ministry to Fudge. Hidden opponents in the ministry, long patient, would ride the tide and demand stronger measures. If moderation failed, the advocates of an iron fist would seize power. A soft pop and a shimmer of air cut through the room. Dumbledore had apparated in, no flue, no entry through the fireplace. He had simply appeared, as if to assert his presence. "Headmaster Dumbledore," Fudge said, relieved and chastened. He needed Dumbledore now. Dumbledore's eyes behind his half-moon spectacles were grave. He had already understood the reports. "I'm afraid your idea will not work, Cornelius," he said quietly. "Roger did not leave a back door in these mirrors that can simply be banned or switched off by order." "Then I'll ring Roger at once. He invented them. He'll know what to do." Fudge began, then stopped as Dumbledore's expression warned him. He hurried to make his plan sound more respectable. "What I mean is, we should activate an emergency protocol to route all online two-way mirrors onto a temporary ministry network. We could centralize the feeds and screen for any trace of the attackers. We'll need Roger's technical help." Fudge put on his own mirror of Airicid, or rather, the communication mirror used to reach Roger, and tried to make the connection. The minutes stretched, but the link didn't come through. Because at that very moment, on the other end of the line, Roger faced a far more immediate and deadly threat. Standing before him were Lord Voldemort and several of his most dangerous, murderous followers, Hogwarts Castle. The school was unusually quiet for the Christmas holidays. Only a handful of teachers and students remained. Almost everyone had a quick-write charm, but only a few owned a mirror of Airicid. The production cost for the mirror of Airicid still ran close to 50 galleons, so Roger set the retail price at a staggering 200 galleons, nearly 30 times the cost of an ordinary wand. Wiseacre's wizarding equipment, which held the exclusive distribution rights, had initially objected, worried such a high price would torpedo sales. To everyone's surprise, Roger's gamble paid off. The mirror of Airicid didn't sit on the shelves. It sold like wildfire. It never became as ubiquitous as the quick-write charm, but it did become a status symbol, a fashionable item in the wizarding world. Part of the appeal was practical. Earlier alchemical communication devices had been prohibitively expensive, difficult to mass produce, and often incompatible with one another. Roger's mirrors, however, were mass-produced and offered real-time video and voice calls between any two devices. Muggleborns and half-bloods, who knew the limitations of contemporary Muggle technology, found that irresistible. They had the purchasing power to back it up, so the mirrors flew off the shelves. The mirrors, explosive sales, and the profits from the high-price strategy emboldened Roger and the Weasley twins. Fred and George finally had the funds to officially develop their long-dreamed joke products, and Roger confidently poured large sums into a new alchemical venture, a new flying device he called the Flying Cloak. With precious notes on Egyptian flying carpets in Nicholas Flamel's alchemy journals and a research budget of 100,000 galleons, the project moved at breakneck speed. Because the supply chain built for the mirror was already mature, Roger could secure almost any rare material at once. Fred and George, who were used to scraping by, stared in astonishment as Roger effectively burned money for research. Within days, the prototype flying cloak had taken shape. Before Roger could run a test, Professor Gilderoy Lockhart arrived to collect him for promotional publicity. He had arranged for a reporter from the Wizarding Daily to meet them in Hogsmeade. Any opportunity to be seen in the papers sounded like the clinking of galleons to Lockhart, and Roger, short on research funds, agreed at once. At noon, Lockhart picked up a small briefcase and led Roger, draped in the new flying cloak, out of the castle. Thanks to the professor's privileges, Aurors at the gate let them pass. They cut through the forbidden forest path and reached the village in under an hour. Hogsmeade was decked in silver and white, ribbons, Christmas trees, red stockings, full of holiday cheer. Business had been poor while Dementors patrolled the roads. Now that the Dementors were gone, the village hummed with life again. Instead of taking him to the Hog's Head, the Three Broomsticks, or Madame Puddifoot's, Lockhart steered Roger toward the long-abandoned shrieking shack on the village outskirts. Roger's stomach tightened. In the original story, this was where Professor Lupin transformed during the full moon, and where Sirius Black's truth about Peter Pettigrew came out. Why choose this place for an interview? Footsteps in the snow answered him, heavy, thudding like giant claws. Something was rapidly approaching. Lockhart heard it too. His face went pale, and he shoved Roger toward the shack. It was too late. A huge black dog, broad as a bull calf, leapt from the dry grass. With a swipe of its massive paws, it knocked Lockhart into the doorway, then charged in, low and menacing. Roger recognized Sirius Black in his animagus form at a glance. He'd thought the dragnet had had him, but Sirius had apparently been lurking near Hogsmeade all along. Why attack Lockhart? Maybe he was trying to keep people away from the shack. Or, Roger's mind flickered, maybe Peter Pettigrew was hidden on Lockhart somehow. If that were true, bringing Pettigrew in would net the 20,000 galleon reward. Roger followed into the shack without hesitation. The interior was ruinous. Thick dust, flaking walls, overturned furniture, a broken chair on the threshold. Lockhart lay collapsed on the floor, one arm clamped in the dog's jaws so he couldn't reach his wand. He glanced up at Roger and croaked, "Quick! Help me! We have to get out of here! Now!" Then Lockhart moved. He lunged, grabbed Roger with one hand and the briefcase with the other, and with uncanny precision put his foot on that inconspicuous broken stool leg by the door. It all happened too fast. Because it was not a spell, the protective ring on Roger's hand did not react. The moment Lockhart pressed the stool leg, Roger felt as if a hook had jerked viciously at his navel. His feet left the floor. Wind roared in his ears. The room stretched and twisted into a dizzy smear of color. When the world reassembled, Roger was standing on a cliff on Scotland's east coast above the bleak North Sea. Snow threw across the wind-swept precipice. Hundreds of cages ringed a hastily built altar at the cliff's center. Quirrell's face had regained a youthful glow. Magic thrummed in the air around Joel and Lucius like a viscous substance, making the air ripple. Around them, a dozen wizards in archaic robes, men who looked as if they had stepped out of a different age, held wands of peculiar shapes, rough wooden staves, gnarled branches, even a massive rune-covered sword. They stared at the triumvirate in the center with expressions of awestruck horror. They had just witnessed something no quiet conclave had expected to see. After sacrificing 10,000 muggles, the three at the altar had gained a visible, terrifying enhancement. Power surged from them. Joel was the first to lose restraint. He lifted his wand and, almost casually, cast a freezing charm. The churning sea froze solid as far as the eye could see, a silent, glassy wasteland. "Such power," Joel murmured, looking out over his handiwork as though imagining himself capable of taking on Dumbledore then and there. Lucius hovered in midair, feeling his life extended, roughly doubled, he estimated. He expected to live close to 300 years. A miracle, he thought. Before Quirrell could even register any change, Lord Voldemort took him over. Voldemort rose into the air, looking down at the assembly from above. "Do you see?" his voice hissed. "This is the beginning of a new world, a new era that belongs to wizards." Faced with such godlike power, the secluded families bowed one by one. The leader stepped forward. "The Schainerman family pledges loyalty to the great Lord Voldemort," he said, voice heavy with reverence. Voldemort inclined his head slightly, pale satisfaction crossing his features. He was about to speak when a rapidly spinning, multicolored vortex tore open at the cliff's center. "Ah!" Voldemort's tone sharpened with sudden excitement. "Look, who has come, my final soul fragment. He has brought." The vortex spit out 2 men and a dog. For a moment the colors distorted, then Voldemort saw clearly. One of the men was Roger Lewis. The triumphant grin froze on Voldemort's face. His pupils narrowed, his composure cracking for the first time. Lockhart, still clutching the briefcase and panting with obvious delight, announced loudly across the cliff, "Master, the person you wanted, I have brought him." Chapter 88, Fourth Resurrection. On the east coast of Scotland, atop a jagged cliff, the North Sea wind howled cold and relentless. Roger's feet hit solid ground with a heavy thud, and thrown by the force, he tumbled forward. At the same instant, the hand that had been gripping him loosened. A chill ran up his spine when Lockhart's voice reached him. Only then did Roger understand he had walked straight into Lord Voldemort's trap. He scrambled to his feet and took in his surroundings. The vast, roiling sea stretched away to the horizon, the cliff face plunging down in sheer, dangerous drops. Nearby stood rusted iron cages, an ominous stone altar in the center of the clearing, and a dozen or so wizards in strange robes, standing perfectly still. Above them all, a dark figure hovered in midair, Lord Voldemort himself. This was clearly his resurrection ceremony. Where, then, did that leave him? Roger drew his wand and braced himself. He had already fought for his life against Voldemort before. He could not allow this ceremony to succeed. Voldemort's voice cut through the wind like a knife. "Idiot! Utter, complete idiot! Look what you've done!" He was livid, his features twisted with fury. He had given explicit orders not to disturb Lewis, and had even used a confusing charm so Roger would ignore Harry Potter while Wormtail brought Harry out. Instead, this fool had kidnapped Roger as if he were some prize, while the true target, Harry, had been delivered, yet not in the way Voldemort expected. There was also that big black dog. If anyone dared tell him the dog was Harry, Voldemort thought viciously, they would be rewarded with Avada Kedavra at once. Now the effects of Polyjuice had worn off. Lockhart's form contorted and shrank. By the time the man stumbled to the altar, he no longer looked like Lockhart at all. He was short, pudgy, with thinning hair and a bald patch. Peter Pettigrew. Wormtail had been exposed. Wormtail cowered beneath Voldemort's murderous gaze and the wand that could flash green at any moment. He scrambled to the altar, pawed frantically through a handbag, and dragged out the unconscious Harry Potter, stunned by a stupefy. "Master, everyone's been brought back. That big black dog is Sirius Black. He grabbed me on the way," Peter stammered. For a moment, Voldemort's fury blurred his thinking. Could it be that Sirius Black and Roger had intercepted Peter while he carried Harry, following him here? If so, Peter's actions under pursuit, bringing Harry back to Voldemort, spoke to his loyalty, however inept his skill. Voldemort's anger cooled somewhat. He looked at Peter with a faint, merciless satisfaction. But seeing Roger at the scene of yet another resurrection made his heart falter. He had learned the price of delay from 2 previous failures. This time, his preparations were thorough. He had bolstered his followers and summoned reclusive wizards as assistants. The ceremony would not be stopped, at least that was what he believed. But it had to be rushed. There could be no delay. "Very well, Wormtail. Your loyalty is noted," Voldemort said, his voice colder but controlled. At his glance, Joel Shafiq and Lucius Malfoy stepped forward from the assembled ranks and moved to block Roger and Sirius. Voldemort raised his wand and aimed it at Harry. The unconscious boy gave a muffled groan. A dark shadow slid from his body, a hideous thing that resembled a malformed infant, the last fragment of Voldemort's soul. "Begin," Voldemort ordered. Quirrell, having regained control of his borrowed body, obeyed. He smashed a ceramic jar, and a sickly green mist spread instantly over the cliff. The mists had been prepared for the ritual. Thousands of imprisoned muggles, trapped in cages above, writhed and moaned as the poison leached the life from them. Death energy, harvested through suffering, fed the ritual. Sirius Black had reverted to his human form too. Gaunt and ragged, his long, filthy hair hung past his elbows. His eyes burned with such hatred he looked like a corpse risen for revenge. He stared at Joel and Lucius, who blocked the way, and at the trembling figure of Peter behind them. He bared yellowed teeth in a feral grin and laughed once, harshly. He called to Roger at his side. "Roger Lewis? I've seen your face in the papers. I'm Sirius Black. How about we team up, at least for now?" There was calculation behind the words. If Roger could pin Joel and Lucius down, Sirius would grab the rat. Roger's response surprised him. With a sweep of his cloak, he launched himself into the air. His voice was resolute. "No, Black, I have to stop Voldemort's resurrection. Hold these two for me," he added, nodding at Joel and Lucius. Fate, however, had other plans. Joel and Lucius showed no interest in facing Sirius. They cast flight charms in near-perfect unison and rose, intercepting Roger in the sky. That left Sirius free to advance on Peter. He stalked forward step by step, each footfall full of venom. "Now, Wormtail, it's time to pay," he rasped. Two fights ignited at once, one above between Roger and the two flying Death Eaters, and one on the ground between Sirius and Peter. Roger had assumed Joel and Lucius wouldn't be especially formidable. He was wrong. Joel flicked his wand, and a fierce, rapid freezing charm lashed out like a coiling serpent. Roger, new to fighting while wearing a flying cloak, found his aerial movement awkward. He couldn't avoid the spell. It struck him. Instantly, his ring, the one enchanted with the snake scale armor charm, glowed and took the hit. The charm held, but barely. The freezing curse was far stronger than Roger expected. It did not recoil or reflect, and the impact nearly shattered his armor. One more such blow, and it would fail. Joel, shocked himself, realized how powerful his spell had been after Voldemort's enhancement. He had expected it to cut through most defenses, perhaps equal to a full-strength blow from a legendary wizard. That it had been stopped by an unfamiliar charm unsettled him. The mirror of Ericid in Roger's hand vibrated, a communication request from Cornelius Fudge. Before Roger could consider answering, Joel sent two more freezing charms screaming his way. Roger struggled to steer his cloak, dodging and twisting in the air, frantically reactivating the snake-scale armor over and over. He had no time to accept Fudge's call. The mirror's vibration faded, then flared again. This time, it was Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. Roger felt a rush of relief. He reached for the mirror to connect when Lucius, waiting for an opening, snarled a blasting curse. The explosion didn't punch through the armor directly, but the shockwave rocked Roger bodily. He lost control of the cloak and was hurled down, crashing heavily back to the ground. "Lucius, take care of the wills from the Shimmering family at once." Voldemort's voice carried across the plateau. "I need those wills now, to reunite my will and my soul." Voldemort's body had already begun to separate itself from Quirrell's. Multiple shadowy threads writhed within it, and the ritual had reached a critical phase. Lucius glanced at Roger sprawled on the ground and turned without hesitation, flying toward the far side of the altar. With the wills of over a dozen wizards brought into the ritual, the energy pulsing around the altar intensified, trembling with unstable power. The resurrection that had been so carefully prepared seemed at last to be within Voldemort's grasp. 89. Horrified. The atmosphere in Cornelius Fudge's office was leaden. The minister and Albus Dumbledore were presiding over an emergency meeting while trying to contact Roger through the two-way mirror, an enchanted mirror of Ericid adapted for communication. An Auror had just brought in a crucial recording taken by the only witch who had witnessed the attack. But even after the ministry officials had watched the whole thing, the meeting was at an impasse. Traces through conventional channels, the trace, portkey registrations, flu network logs, all showed nothing. The attackers had simply appeared and left without a trace. Rufus Scrimgeour at last broke the silence with his raspy voice. Could they be those secluded wizards? That suggestion snapped everyone to attention. The possibility was frighteningly likely. The footage clearly showed one of the attackers carrying an ancient greatsword, a weapon associated only with the old, secluded wizarding families who still kept the tradition of wizard swords. If it had been the work of those reclusive houses instead of Sirius Black, Fudge felt an immediate, if grim, relief. He could shift blame to them. Public panic still had to be calmed, of course, and decisive action taken. But the ministry was already stretched thin. Keeping daily operations running had been difficult, and a large number of aurors were stationed at Hogwarts. Pulling them away left other areas exposed. Leaving them at Hogwarts risked the savior himself, Harry Potter. If something happened to Harry, Fudge knew the fallout could cost him his post. "Cornelius, Hogwarts is very safe," Dumbledore said, seeing the minister's focus shifting and the aurors he had borrowed poised to be recalled. "The aurors need not remain at the school." However, his tone dropped, slow and grave. "I must remind you that Tom Riddle, I fear he has not truly died. From what I have gathered, his return may not be far off." Dumbledore wanted the ministry to lend its resources to trace Lord Voldemort, if only to buy time until a way to destroy him could be found. Fudge, for his part, could scarcely hide his impatience. He suspected the old man of alarmism and, less pleasantly, of expanding Hogwarts' influence at the ministry's expense. In Britain, aside from the Ministry of Magic, Hogwarts was the single most powerful wizarding institution. Its head wielded enormous sway. If that headmaster also happened to be the most powerful wizard of the age, it could undermine the ministry itself. Since taking office, Fudge had been living under exactly that shadow. "Albus," Fudge cut in, irritation plain, "let's talk practical. How do we catch those lawless recluses, or bring Sirius Black to justice right away?" He didn't believe a word about Voldemort's return. If his own position weren't at stake, he would have dismissed the notion entirely. At that moment, the two-way mirror reacted. It had connected. A flicker of triumph crossed Fudge's face. Compared with the unmanageably gifted Dumbledore, Roger seemed a figure he could rely on. If Roger's mirror network could be centralized through the ministry, it would bolster both investigations and Fudge's authority. Roger, like Lucius Malfoy, might become a rising force worth backing. "All right, there's news from Roger's side." Fudge waved at Dumbledore with a self-satisfied air, flicking his wand to cast a projection charm so the mirror's image played in the air. It was meant as both a show of force to Dumbledore and a public display to the officials present. The image that formed destroyed his plans. It was not Roger's face, and it was not a familiar scene from Hogwarts. Instead, the mirror showed a jagged cliff over a raging sea. There was no sea near Hogwarts. The frame steadied, and a terrifying figure filled the view. Joel Shafiq, the wanted main culprit in the Nicholas Lamay Manor robbery. Joel was attacking Roger. Every person in the office was an elite, top NEWT. Scores, specialists in their fields, seasoned aurors, and they all registered the same thing at once. The power Joel displayed was far beyond expectations. Rufus Scrimgeour, who had helped investigate the Lamay Manor case and knew Joel's reputation, looked particularly stunned by the eruption of force. Dumbledore's gaze was the keenest. He caught an odd undercurrent in Joel's magic, a hint of soul magic, akin to a Horcrux, but without the usual signs of soul-splitting. Before anyone could absorb that, Roger on the other side rose into the air, and then, impossibly, he split into more than a dozen lifelike copies. Joel recoiled, confused by the sudden spell, unable at first to tell true from false. Roger used the distraction to merge among his duplicates and buy himself a moment to breathe. "Merlin's beard! What's going on?" Fudge demanded, stunned. "How did Roger run into that robber Joel? Isn't he supposed to be at Hogwarts?" He cast a pointed look at Dumbledore and could not hide a small satisfaction. With Sirius Black and secluded wizards both in recent headlines, the idea that a robber had turned up remotely seemed to undercut the headmaster's assurances of safety. "Merlin, what kind of magic is this?" Senior Undersecretary Amelia Bones cried, staring at the screen in disbelief. Most present had only heard rumors that Roger had been involved with a basilisk in the courtroom and was extraordinarily powerful, but none had expected such astonishing sorcery. The clones behaved independently, casting spells as if each were the original. It was another challenge to what they thought they knew of transfiguration. Roger, frantic but determined, had little time to observe the ministry's reactions. When he spotted Dumbledore's projected image in the mirror, he shouted with everything he had. "Principal, it's Lord Voldemort. He's captured both me and Harry. He's about to be resurrected." Then Roger shifted the mirror's angle, exposing a wider view. In the distance, an altar of terrible intent came into focus. On it, a blurred, pallid shape was rising, a figure slowly floating into the air, surrounded by a chill that translated even through the glass. Everyone rose as one, faces drained of color. Fear was plain on every face, but it showed in different ways. Fudge's expression was edged with shocked disbelief and mounting dread. Dumbledore's eyes were dark with concern and a hard, resolute determination. 90. Voldemort returns on Scotland's east coast, atop cliffs overlooking the North Sea. Lord Voldemort's resurrection ceremony reached its climax. Roger's magic had reached its limit. He had barely managed to conjure over a dozen clones. But Joel, who had been intercepting him, was extremely experienced. Unable to tell which was the real body, Joel simply guarded the altar. Anyone who tried to approach was met with ruthless counterattacks. After several rounds of clones were destroyed, Roger still could not break through the line of defense. He had not come away empty-handed, though. Through the biocomputer's precise observation, Roger glimpsed the secret behind Voldemort's ritual. It did not rely solely on his old soul theory. It incorporated the principles of voluntarism. Those dozen or so strange chanting wizards were using their iron wills as fuel to help Voldemort recondense his long, fragmented source of will. The method faintly echoed the dragon transformation. Roger knew, using absolute will to distort reality and complete a perfect transformation. This was an extremely pure, idealistic form of voluntarism. It also confirmed Roger's earlier conjecture. If collective memory or belief clung to someone as not dead, it might truly be possible to reverse life and death and achieve resurrection. On the biocomputer's display, the colossal magical power converted from the sacrifice of tens of thousands of Muggles surged like an endless undercurrent. Nourished by that power, the magical patterns of the chanting wizards grew wildly, twisting and interweaving like eerie vines until they linked with Voldemort's own patterns, driving the repair of his shattered source of will. Roger had a sudden realization. The wills of others could be harnessed like this, like cluster computing, giving a single machine the power to handle a vast project. When the fragmented will finally rejoined, Voldemort's incomplete soul transformed. It manifested as Tom Riddle at his peak, handsome, cold, with an unsettling elegance. Roger even heard gasps from the other side of the Mirror of Erised. Voldemort then used the ritual's remaining power to reshape flesh and blood. A blinding light erupted, majestic magic hardening into a terrifying energy storm that blew the mountain of bones around the altar into dust. As the dust settled, Roger watched with constricted pupils as a thin, dark figure rose from the center of the altar. He was more restrained than before, and more suffocating. There was no doubt. Voldemort had succeeded. He had completed the trinity of will, soul, and body, returning in a new, more perfect form. Enough, the command, cold and sharp as thunder, split the air. Voldemort did not need a wand. He rose naturally into the air. With a casual wave of his hand, a sickly green killing curse shot out, forcing Sirius Black back and saving Peter Pettigrew, who had already been hit by several curses and was moments from death. Joel and Quirrell gathered behind their master as his terrifying eyes fixed on Roger, finally allowing Roger to see his full appearance. Skin paler than a skeleton, blood-red snake pupils, yet his features had miraculously returned to the handsomeness of Tom Riddle's era. His hair was a neat shock of short blonde, as if he had aged backward 40 years. He radiated a sinister, dangerous charm. Voldemort's gaze swept over Roger. He tested his new body with a slight turn of his neck, his face showing no joy or sorrow, only the cold ruthlessness of one who had endured to the end. His crimson eyes flicked to the unconscious Harry on the ground, then back to Roger, and a cold, sharp, sinister laugh escaped him. "Master! Master, save me! I can't hold on." Peter Pettigrew whimpered on the ground. Voldemort pointed casually, and a complex light of magic fell upon him. In the biocomputer's reading, it was a high-level restoration charm that wove together soul and magic, an exquisitely ingenious structure not recorded in the Hogwarts library. Its effect was terrifying. Within a few breaths, Peter's injuries healed at a rate visible to the eye. That brief observation seemed to alert Voldemort. He turned to Roger, voice falsely intimate. "Let me see who this is." "Oh, it's my dearest student, Roger Lewis." Before the last syllable faded, he snapped his fingers. The two-way mirror Roger was wearing dimmed instantly. His connection to Minister Fudge was severed. A cruel smile crossed Voldemort's face. "Long time no see. I didn't expect our teacher-student reunion to be here. Such an important moment shouldn't be disturbed by idle people. Would you not agree, my clever student?" He floated toward Roger like a specter, accompanied by Joel, Quirrell, and the newly healed Peter. From the ground, Lucius Malfoy led a group of reclusive wizards in a flank, confronting Sirius and completing a ring that surrounded Roger. "Do you remember the soul theory I taught you? That was only the beginning of the power I possess," Voldemort said, his voice equal parts seduction and threat. He pointed at Joel and Quirrell. "I have led them onto the path of godhood, immortality. Do you know what this is?" Roger answered with silence. He truly did not know. Voldemort's past teachings had likely been laced with backdoors and misinformation. Fortunately, he had the biocomputer. He had not been entirely fooled. "Of course you don't," Voldemort hissed triumphantly. "This is the 4-in-1 immortality theory, the true path to eternity, and I am more immortal and indestructible than you can imagine. I believe you'll understand these words deeply one day. Aha, though perhaps you won't have a future." He circled Roger like a poisonous fish in dark water, sneering. "They were clever. They chose the right path. They chose the future. They chose eternity. But you rejected me. You rejected the future, and you rejected eternity. Tsk, what a pity." At that moment, cloaks rustled. Wizards apparated from every shadow on the cliff, hooded and masked like Lucius and the rest. They approached slowly, almost in awe, as if they could not believe their own eyes, and looked up with complex expressions at the godlike figure in the air. Voldemort floated calmly, accepting the long-overdue audience. One by one, the Death Eaters sank to their knees, their voices low and near moaning as they intoned, "Master, Master, 10 Downing Street," the Prime Minister's office. It was just after an emergency meeting had broken up, and the ministers had filed out. The Prime Minister sat alone, slumped in his big chair. Afternoon tea waited, but he had no appetite for it. His fingers trembled around a brief investigative report, which he read and reread, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something he could comprehend. Over 20,000 missing, and more than 100 bodies left behind. What was this? An invasion? It was the gravest attack on British soil since the war, the kind of thing that could ignite a larger conflict. The press was tightly curtailed, but the cabinet and parliament had been told the truth. Fortunately, nobody wanted war. The parties had reached a rare, uneasy consensus and were backing the Prime Minister's office with quiet cooperation. But who had done it? There were only a handful of states with that kind of capability. The old great enemy had fallen. Its successor was mired in chaos. Across the Atlantic, the Americans had neither motive nor need. The idea they would strike their own ally was absurd. Terrorists? Rebels? Cultists? None of it made sense. One thought stubbornly forced itself forward. Those people. Wizards. There was a group hidden in Britain with powers that made the incomprehensible look simple. To him, most of them could be lumped with terrorists. He let out a slow breath, rose, and crossed to the ornate marble fireplace. He knocked on the oil painting above the mantel. The little man in the portrait, powdered wig, frog-like features, seemed to come alive. His painted eyes brightened and fixed on the Prime Minister. Suppressing his annoyance, the Prime Minister requested a meeting with the Minister for Magic, Mr. Cornelius Fudge. Emerald green flames rose from the hearth with a soft whoosh, and within them another room unfolded, a meeting chamber, full of solemn faces. "The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom requests a meeting with the Minister for Magic, Mr. Cornelius Fudge," called someone beyond the flames. Fudge on the other end looked dreadful. His face was ashen, his whole bearing shaken. It was an expression the Prime Minister knew well, the look of a man who had been thoroughly beaten. He forced himself to keep calm. It irritated him to his core that the Minister for Magic, technically a subordinate, often comported himself as if he were above reproach. From their first meeting, Fudge had been disrespectful, and the Prime Minister resented it. Are you saying the Aberdeen incident was the work of your people? He snapped before he could stop himself. His voice trembled with anger. In the ministry's side of the flames, the two-way mirror was showing a scene that made the room erupt into chaos as a hooded, thin figure unmistakably resembling Lord Voldemort came clearly into view. Fudge's cry, warped by fear, rang out. "Investigate! Find out exactly where that is! Now! Immediately!" Dumbledore, calm even amid the panic, had already drawn several Smallver birds from his robes. He tapped them with his wand and muttered a few quick spells. The space around the birds shimmered, and they apparated away. A heavy, suffocating realization settled over everyone in the office. He who must not be named had returned. His resurrection could not be stopped. Fudge managed to steady himself enough to speak into the flames. Yes, this was neither a foreign invasion nor the work of Muggles. And, he hesitated, gathering his strength while pointing at the mirror, I regret to inform you that he has returned. He who must not be named. This is his doing. He gave a halting account of the situation as best he could. 12 years ago, he said, a child had been hailed as the savior, a 1-year-old who had somehow defeated that dark man. But now he was back. The Prime Minister listened, incredulous. This is rebellion? Civil war? You've done nothing? You're just watching him. Resurrect? The Prime Minister could not bring himself to accept resurrect in a literal sense, but he refused to show ignorance. Perhaps for them, resurrection meant returning from hiding or recovering from grievous injury. He was almost gleeful at the chance to scold. Contempt from a peer stung the most. Why didn't your people just shoot this rebel leader on sight? Take him out! Fudge made a weak, bitter laugh. Of course we acted. Those live images were sent back by my people at great risk. He wished he hadn't said it aloud. Blatant falsehoods in front of witnesses made him look worse. The Prime Minister pressed on. Then send another boy. Send reinforcements. Total mobilization. Fudge's patience was gone. The political world the Prime Minister inhabited was utterly different. In a sense, he said, there happens to be a boy facing him there now. But whether poor Roger can handle Lord Voldemort is anyone's guess. The Prime Minister's eyebrow shot up. A boy? 1-year-old? He had an absurd mental image of the American atomic bomb nicknamed Little Boy, and smirked at the possible confusion between children and secret weapons. He pushed for decisive action, certain that the instruments of the state could compensate where the ministry, in his view, had failed. We can find him, he said triumphantly. The power of the United Kingdom is greater than you think. We have satellites, high-definition mapping. He grabbed a small camera from the side cabinet and snapped several photos of the cliff scene reflected in the two-way mirror. He instructed his secretary to send the images to the intelligence services and the Ministry of Defense at the highest priority. The response came back quickly. The location was pinpointed, a seaside cliff on the east coast of Angus, Scotland. At that moment, the image in the mirror jolted violently and went black. The connection cut off as abruptly as it had begun. Roger, or whoever was on that cliff, had gone dark. The Prime Minister felt a cold spike of fear. Thank you for your intelligence, Prime Minister. We have urgent matters to deal with. I will contact you about follow-up, Fudge said hurriedly, almost rude as he severed the fireplace communication. Silence hung in the Prime Minister's office for a breath. Then Dumbledore rose, his voice quiet, but carrying absolute authority as he spoke around the stunned minister. Amelia, Rufus, Kingsley, summon all Aurors at headquarters and in the surrounding regions at once. I will lead a contingent to Apparat to Angus. There was no hesitation from those named. Yes, Headmaster Dumbledore, they answered and were gone, moving as if Dumbledore's command was the only one that mattered. Fudge stood frozen, flushed with anger and humiliation. I am the Minister for Magic, he protested, feeling entirely eclipsed. Dumbledore turned to him, half-moon spectacles catching the light, his sharp blue eyes level and composed. Then come with us, Mr. Minister. Scotland, Angus, a cliff on the east coast. The Death Eaters who had arrived moved into two silent ranks, like a guard of honor. They left deliberate gaps between them, as if expecting more to join. But Lord Voldemort was no longer waiting for reinforcements. He hovered in the air, looking down at the hoods and hidden faces. The cold North Sea wind drove fine ice against their robes, making them snap and whisper of the changes of the past 12 years. Welcome, my faithful Death Eaters. Voldemort's voice was not loud, but it cut through the wind with clinical clarity. 12 years. I am gratified that you answered my summons. Let me guess, you came only to see whether I had truly returned? Only Voldemort and Roger stood level in the air. Quirrell and Joel had already descended and now stood at the front of the ranks, looking up to listen to their master. The other Death Eaters finally took notice of the strange young man beside the Dark Lord. Their hooded gazes flickered with alarm and curiosity. He did not look like any of them. Voldemort's voice rose, sharper than before. But I know why you did not come looking for me. If even a shred of loyalty remained, why did no one try to find their master for 12 years? Silence fell, broken only by the keening wind. Quirrell straightened unconsciously. An expression of smug satisfaction passed briefly over his face. Voldemort turned slightly toward Roger. My dear pupil, do you know why this is? He did not wait for an answer. The chill in his voice deepened. I will tell you, because they believed I had failed, that I was finished, so they scurried to my enemies like frightened rats, pleading for mercy, professing innocence, claiming they had been misled, even spouting the absurdity of the Imperius. A murmur, barely contained, ran through the crowd. Lucius Malfoy, farther back, trembled almost imperceptibly. Voldemort fixed his red eyes on Roger. But why did they believe I was finished? Roger, do you know? All of Voldemort's attention seemed to pin Roger in place. Roger felt it like a probe, ready to strike. He had no time for needless defiance. His internal systems, the biocomputer that had analyzed the resurrection ritual, were still racing to consolidate whatever power he could. He also knew Fudge and Dumbledore would likely be on their way. He let the question sit a heartbeat, then said evenly, because they no longer needed an eternal leader. The answer landed like a stone. A few of the Death Eaters shifted. Private thoughts they had never voiced felt suddenly exposed. Voldemort made no show of surprise. Clever, Roger. You always see to the core. His gaze swept the ranks with colder contempt. Exactly. You were relieved to see my defeat. You preferred crawling to that protector of mudbloods and muggles, Albus Dumbledore, to brush up against his coattails. He spoke with a sneer that carried a strange scholarly bitterness. I only realized this recently. How? By reading Muggle books. Their civilization has surpassed ours in many ways. It pains me. I am deeply disappointed. I discovered that many of my followers have no grand ideals. Blood purity is no more than a shell you hide in, a shield to let you ignore the wizarding world's plight, to forget the Muggle threat, to cling to petty privileges. I am disappointed. Such people are not worthy to follow me, least of all to walk with me toward that new future. One Death Eater suddenly collapsed to the rock, prostrating himself and shaking. Master, forgive me. I beg you. Voldemort's wand flicked lazily. Cruciatus. Avery's howl split the air as the Cruciatus took him. He writhed, rolling on the ground, sound dissolving into hoarse, ragged gasps. Avery, Voldemort said flatly, remember, it is not I who forgives you, but the new future of wizards. Anybody who will not carry our cause can leave now. Go back to Dumbledore. Give up your privileges, your little glories. Ha ha ha. I would very much like to see what becomes of you. He laughed, scornful and wild. No matter, over these 12 years it seems you have not fared well anyway. Ah, master, Avery rasped, trembling. Voldemort's tone shifted suddenly. A shadow of genuine sorrow touched his voice. The Lestranges did not come. I know they still suffer in Azkaban. He raised his voice, cold and sharp. There is an ancient saying from the East, noble character is revealed in hardship. Loyalty is proved in storm and rain. They are noble. They are loyal. Only such people are fit to follow me toward godhood. I shall go to Azkaban myself to welcome them back. Then his voice cut like a knife. Quirinus. Quirrell started but moved forward as commanded. Show the power I have given you, Voldemort ordered. Quirrell drew his wand and poured everything he had into a display. The sea below the cliff boiled. Huge stone chains, 7 or 8 of them, burst from the waves like gigantic serpents, slithering into the sky. Each was as thick as a house, spanning the horizon and radiating suffocating magical pressure. Sirius Black stared up at that almost miraculous sight. Pale, he swallowed and felt hope slip away. The other Death Eaters reacted similarly. Quirrell had been nothing more than a Hogwarts defense against the dark arts teacher, competent but unremarkable. This display was beyond anything they expected. Quirinus first sought me out, Voldemort said lazily, though he had his own selfish motives. Quirrell, who had been smug a moment before, broke into a cold sweat. But all that I can accept, Voldemort continued. If you will lend your strength to the great cause, a little selfishness can be tolerated. Indeed, it will be folded into the torrent of the new wizarding future. I want your faith to be singular, pure, and firm. Quirrell's excitement leaked out. The 2 bleak years of deprivation and humiliation seemed repaid tenfold. Voldemort then called names, almost all ancient pureblood families. Between the spectacle and the threat, the crowd fell into submission. If someone is dead, I will support his widow and children. If someone has fled, let them flee forever. A great cause does not need the useless. He changed tone and with theatrical flourish announced, "Now allow me to introduce 2 special guests to mark my return. You all know them. The first, of course, is our famous savior, Harry Potter," Voldemort said, dripping contempt. At the word, Peter Pettigrew removed the binding spell around Harry. He came awake with a start, bewildered by the sight of Voldemort hovering above and the ring of Death Eaters below. Seeing Roger in midair beside the Dark Lord and Sirius on the ground only deepened his confusion. Roger? Why was Roger standing with Voldemort and with Sirius? Voldemort's sneer cut across Harry's mounting questions. I suppose you are curious what truly happened that night. That is a long story and pointless right now. He snapped, "Wormtail." Peter understood and raised his wand without hesitation. A blinding green surge, the Cruciatus, struck Harry. He erupted in a shriek, pain stealing every coherent thought. He could not reach for his wand or fight back. Sirius's face contorted with absolute hatred for Peter Pettigrew. He lunged, wand in hand, but Roger, who had descended from the air, grabbed his arm and held him fast. "Let me go," Sirius snarled, eyes bloodshot, looking like he would tear Roger apart as well. We have to work together," Roger said rapidly, his voice low, urgent. "Otherwise, no one leaves here alive today." Sirius panted, glancing between the preaching Dark Lord and his godson on the ground. He swallowed down a roar of fury and forced the question through clenched teeth. "What's your plan? Do you trust me?" Roger asked. "I don't trust you," Sirius answered immediately, his voice heavy. Years in Azkaban and the sting of betrayal had taught him caution. "But I trust Dumbledore." Roger's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Then, would you be willing to become a dragon wizard?" 93. Perfect resurrection spell. Fake. Do you see? Lord Voldemort's voice was hoarse and cold, threaded with contemptuous mockery. His mother's ancient magic protected him, but only so far. He still stands before me, as insignificant as an ant. His gaze swept past Harry in an instant, the crimson pupils fixed on Roger Lewis. This boy he knew intimately. He had personally taught Roger for a year and knew exactly what lay beneath that unremarkable skin. Brilliant, insatiably curious, mentally mature beyond his years, possessed of a stubborn, unshakable inner logic, nearly impossible to fool. Worse, the brat had a terrifying zeal for the dark arts, strength far beyond his peers, and even brief, troubling flashes of a seer. His potential was unfathomable. Who did he resemble? The name that once made all Europe tremble, Gellert Grindelwald. Roger had already ruined Voldemort's foolproof resurrection schemes twice. Each time his power chilled the bone, and his growth had been frighteningly rapid. Today he even wore a new flying cloak that let him move through the air at will. If this growth continued unchecked, who could say where it would end? For the first time, Voldemort felt vexed, perhaps a touch of dread. This world needed only one god. The second, Voldemort announced theatrically as he drifted above Roger like some dark deity surveying mortals. "Allow me to present Roger Lewis. I trust you all know the name, the youngest recipient in history of the Order of Merlin, a pioneer of polymorphic transformation and magical creature transfiguration." He paused and inclined his head to the restless crowd below, his tone heavy with false regret. "Of course, he was also my one personally taught student. Alas, I failed to guide him onto the right path." A stifled gasp rippled through the Death Eaters. Many recognized Roger from the courtroom spectacle. "He has twice shattered my perfect resurrection plans." Voldemort's voice turned thin and venomous. "Had he not interfered, I would long since have returned by means of the Philosopher's Stone. Can the struggles of mortals hinder the stride of a god?" Yes, I walk the road to divinity. My power is boundless, my life eternal. He spread his arms as if embracing the night itself. If I were absent from this world, I believe Roger would be the next wizard to ascend a throne, and perhaps even gaze upon the seat of godhood. I do not doubt it, but this world needs only one deity. And that deity is me, Voldemort laughed, a grinding sound. Now I shall personally make him the first paving stone beneath my divine throne. The laughter cut off. He raised his hand. Two sickly green killing curses shot like vipers straight at Roger. But Roger had been on full alert. His gains that day outstripped everyone's imagination. Voldemort, history's most brilliant wizard, had cast a resurrection spell that perfectly fused the supreme mysteries of will and soul, a sophistication worthy of a special grade Order of Merlin. Observing it at close range had rewarded Roger richly, deepening his grasp of voluntarism and soul theory and helping him perfect his dragon transformation and the conceived perfect resurrection. Dragon transformation had long been researched, only the final push had been missing. Now, everything clicked. The first test subject would not be Roger himself, but Sirius. Prepared, Roger's form blurred. With a single motion, he shot skyward, narrowly evading the death trails of the killing curses. Then, to the horror of everyone watching, the body of Sirius Black beside him began to contort monstrously. Black horns burst from his brow, dark scales sheathed his frame, a massive tail smashed the ground, wings tore through robes and spread, ending in a savage draconic head that exhaled scorching breath. A living Hebridean black dragon stood on the cliff. Transfiguration again, Voldemort sneered, flicking his wand. Revert! But the spell that should have undone any transformation struck the dragon's scales and vanished like mud in the sea. Far from reverting, Sirius, now a dragon, was enraged. The mountain-like bulk roared, beat its wings, and took to the air. Worse, the dragon could still cast spells. Its maw opened, and instead of ordinary fire, it belched 7 or 8 searing explosive curses that smashed down like meteors among the clustered Death Eaters. Finite incantatum. With a sweep of his pale arm, Voldemort snuffed every explosion. His crimson eyes fixed on Roger aloft, and for the first time his voice carried genuine bewilderment. Well done, Roger. What is this? Like transfiguration, and yet utterly different. Roger's cloak billowed as he landed lightly on the raging dragon's head, a smile tugging at his lips. Of course it's different. Call it evolution, perhaps. Evolution? Voldemort bristled at a concept beyond his ken. Understand it this way. Sirius Black has evolved into a dragon, Roger said calmly, yet he still retains the essence of a wizard. Dragon wizard. Voldemort's eyes narrowed at the implication. An old prophecy comes to mind. You, then Roger Lewis, you must not be allowed to live. At that instant, Voldemort held nothing back. Titanic magic erupted like a tsunami. Across the cliff, a dozen globes of bluish fiend fire sprang to being, raging and swelling. The December chill of Scotland was banished. The air twisted and scorched as if midsummer hell had come. Roger, fearless, spun his wand. 2 condensed Ava Soul Chain curses shot unerringly toward Voldemort. The Dark Lord was wrapped in powerful protections. The curses did not strike him directly. But the chain curse was not single target. On impact, the green chain light refracted like lightning toward the nearest figure, Peter Pettigrew. A shriek. Peter collapsed, his fate unknown. The bizarre, powerful composite curse, tracking, multi-strike, ricocheting, spread panic among the Death Eaters. Even Voldemort spared a glance. The game ends now. Voldemort's voice carried impatience. Roger's strength had exceeded every estimate, and he could not be subdued quickly. Sky-concealing fiendfire sealed heaven and earth, trapping every living soul on the burning cliff. Voldemort and the 2 in the air, man and dragon, clashed in fierce combat. The world was devoured by flame. The dragon roared. Spell light slashed the fiery curtain, like the wars of gods in ancient legend. Riding the black dragon, Roger darted through the roaring fiendfire like a dark butterfly. A perilous thought ran through his mind. Should he risk using the still imperfect perfect resurrection to revive the lingering memory shadow of Salazar Slytherin? 94. The final strangulation. Scotland, Angus, a cliff on the east coast. The battle raged. Sky-darkening fiendfire had turned the cliff into an airtight furnace, flames churning as if the fabled twilight of the gods had descended. Even the Death Eaters far below felt the scorching, suffocating heat. High above, Roger, riding his astonishingly agile flying cloak, dodged Lord Voldemort's lethal curses time and again. The two clashed fiercely in midair, and for the moment the Dark Lord could not touch him. "My power is limitless," another dark curse missed. Voldemort spun, fiend fire hissing like serpents from his fingertips. "There's nowhere to run. A binding ward seals this place, and the fiend fire is everywhere. How long can you keep slipping away?" But Roger slipped like an eel. Every spell missed him by a hair. Worse for Voldemort. The Black Dragon, Sirius transformed, kept diving to harass, forcing the Dark Lord to split his attention. When Voldemort flung several killing curses to drive the dragon back, Roger seized the chance to dart in closer. "You can't hit me," Roger shot back, never pausing as he banked sharply through the air. Thank Merlin for the custom-made flying cloak, fast enough for prolonged high-speed flight and charmed for stable maneuvering even at such velocity. "Impossible," Voldemort roared. For the first time since the fight began, he halted. With lightning speed, he began a long, obscure incantation. The spell completed, and for an instant nothing happened. Then the magic revealed itself. In the next breath, a horrific sight, Voldemort cast 6 different spells at once. Incarcerus, Constrictio Draconis, Reducto, Cruciatus, Petrificus Totalis, Defindo. 6 spells, each a different hue, each deadly, wove a net of death over Roger and the dragon. The dragon took the first brunt. It dodged the binding ropes, but the obscure Constrictio Draconis struck home, a spell nowadays studied only by Ministry dragon handlers, yet in Voldemort's hands magnified to impossible strength, pinning the huge beast and sending it screaming toward the ground. Roger had no time for Sirius. 4 curses were on his heels. He twisted and rolled frantically, escaping the lethal salvo by a whisper. The instant he steadied, Roger flicked his wand, and a dozen duplicates burst into being, everyone lifelike and indistinguishable. "Aha, that trick again!" Voldemort hissed, delighted with his own multiple casting. "Alas, I've already seen through it." Since the battle at Nicholas Lamay Manor, he had studied the duplication charm, certain he could spot the real one. Without hesitation, he cast Legilimency and recoiled. Every copy radiated genuine thoughts. Impossible. Utterly impossible. For the first time, Voldemort felt events slipping beyond his grasp. Yet he remained a once-in-a-century genius of the dark arts, master of will and soul. Recalling that Roger had helped Sirius complete the evolution into a dragon wizard, a ritual of will, memory, and soul, he grasped the truth. Roger, too, had delved into memory magic. Each clone carried real memory fragments and projections of soul, fooling Legilimency completely. His multiple casting tactic would gain little here. In fury, Voldemort hurled spell after spell, none truly threatening Roger, while the minutes bled away. Suddenly he froze, sensing something. His crimson serpent eyes snapped toward London beyond the fiendfire curtain. A shrill, hate-filled shriek tore from his throat. He whirled back to the Death Eaters, fingers slashing the air. A vast circle flared beneath them, images twisting like reflections on a shattered pond, then a blinding flash, and every one of them vanished. They reappeared beyond the fiendfire canopy, hovering above the raging sea outside the cliff. Meanwhile, the fiery prison constricted inward, ready to incinerate everything on the rock. Still unsatisfied, Voldemort hovered, thrusting torrents of fiendfire into the barrier, determined to reduce Roger to ash. While he reinforced the flames and the Death Eaters gaped in awe, a deafening crack exploded from the open ground on the far side of the cliff. More than 100 figures appeared. At their head, robed in star-stitched purple gold, snowy beard to his chest, half-moon spectacles over hawk-bright blue eyes, was Albus Dumbledore. Behind him stood the pillars of the Order of the Phoenix, Minerva McGonagall, grim-faced, Severus Snape, cloak billowing, Rubeus Hagrid clutching his pink umbrella, Remus Lupin, and Mad-Eye Moody. Minister for Magic Cornelius Fudge, Senior Undersecretary Amelia Bones, Head of Magical Law Enforcement Rufus Scrimgeour, Auror Office Director Kingsley Shacklebolt, and ranks of elite Aurors followed. Minister Fudge stood frozen, soul seeming to flee at the apocalyptic sight. When his eyes found the dreaded figure overhead and the masked Death Eaters, his wand clattered to the ground. He has indeed returned, has he not? Dumbledore's calm, firm voice steadied the almost collapsing minister. Fudge's face was bloodless, a finger trembling in Voldemort's direction, lips working in silence. Every evasion, every self-deception, shattered under the weight of truth. High above, Voldemort noticed the newcomers. He ceased reinforcing the fiendfire and led the Death Eaters forward. Framed by roaring flames, his resurrected form looked more demonic than ever, a god returned from hell. His serpent-red pupils swept the gathering. Aurors tightened their grips. Some flinched, others gasped. His gaze lingered on Snape, a chilling smile curling his lip. At last he settled on the trembling Fudge. Voldemort inclined his head with mocking grace, voice sibilant and icy. "Honorable Minister Cornelius Fudge, what a grand welcome. I am overwhelmed." The look sent Fudge stumbling backward. No sound would come. He hadn't wanted to come, but Dumbledore's public words had left him no choice. Refuse, and his ministry days would end. Seeing such cowardice, Voldemort lost interest. He turned, crimson eyes locking with Dumbledore's calm, fathomless blue. "My dear Professor," he murmured, relish in every syllable, "how good of you to drop by. Where are Roger and Harry?" Dumbledore's gaze swept the scene, finding no sign of the two youths. Voldemort lifted a pale hand toward the churning fiendfire curtain and laughed. Shrill and terrible. "Why, inside there, of course. Do stay and enjoy the grand finale of their performance." Dumbledore's pupils narrowed slightly. The Lord Voldemort standing before him had not only truly returned, he seemed, impossibly, even stronger than at his previous peak. Magical fluctuations rippled from his body like a visible tide, making the air itself feel unstable. Without hesitation, Dumbledore raised his wand. An ice-blue spell shot out, blooming midair into a giant, shimmering net of cold light that descended upon Voldemort. At the same time, he flicked his wand toward the pile of boulders by the cliff. The rocks shuddered, rose with a grinding rumble, and reshaped themselves into several burly stone giants. They swung massive arms and began hurling boulders at the Death Eaters who were suspended in the air and could not fly unaided. Chaos erupted. Except for Joel, Quirrell, and Lucius Malfoy, the other Death Eaters relied entirely on Voldemort's magic to levitate. Now they were sitting targets. Screams rose as boulders struck. Some Aurors were crushed instantly. Those who reacted quickly threw up shield charms and, though blasted into the sea, survived. Those slower were shattered, bones and tendons broken, as they plunged into the water, fates uncertain. Voldemort's reactions were faster than anyone expected. He easily dodged Dumbledore's net, cast sturdy shields over his remaining followers, and lowered them safely to the ground. "Tom, choosing to stay here and wait for us was likely a mistake," Dumbledore said, his voice calm but carrying undeniable force. "I have brought elite Aurors, and we are fully prepared." "Is that so?" Voldemort hissed, a sneer in his tones and malice in his scarlet eyes. "I, on the other hand, feel that you have come to offer sacrifices for my grand return." To prove the point, he displayed his frightening multicasting. 6 sickly green killing curses shot out like venomous snakes, striking toward the Auror team. Even with guards up, 2 Aurors failed to dodge. They were struck and died instantly. On the other side, Joel, Quirrell, and Lucius displayed formidable strength. Only McGonagall, Snape, and Moody, with superb combat skill, held them off. Fortunately, the Ministry had numbers, and for a time the two sides reached a brutal stalemate. "Remus, Rubus, go check on Roger's situation," Dumbledore called to Hagrid. Then a sharp light flared in his calm eyes and he moved. A barrage of astonishingly powerful spells poured toward Voldemort like torrential rain, whistling through the air with terrible speed. The pressure alone made Voldemort's scalp tingle. He could not take them head-on and was forced to dodge in midair, visibly strained. "Thinking of killing me, Dumbledore. You cannot do it," Voldemort taunted as he dodged. "How will we know the result without trying, Tom?" Dumbledore replied steadily, closing the distance step by step, his spells unceasing. He moved with such composed poise that it seemed less a life-or-death struggle than a leisurely walk through a courtyard. Voldemort laughed arrogantly. "Ha ha! It's useless! My life is eternal and immortal. You cannot kill me." "You've mistaken one thing, Tom," Dumbledore said, approaching as if discussing afternoon tea. "You haven't ignited the divine fire yet." Voldemort's laughter stopped. Uncertainty and alarm flashed in his scarlet eyes, the expression of a man glimpsed and seen through. He was still empowered only by the wills of a dozen or so followers, far from having been cast with Horcruxes, and thus, in truth, not as invulnerable as he pretended. In a flash, he flicked his right hand and summoned an unprecedented fiendfire, a hellish blaze that roared into being and lunged at Dumbledore. Simultaneously, he apparated. A heartbeat later, he reappeared behind Dumbledore and let loose an extremely condensed killing curse, weaponizing an attack from both front and back. At the critical second, a gold and red figure burst from Dumbledore's sleeve, Fawkes the Phoenix. The bird screamed and dove resolutely between Dumbledore and the curse, opening its beak and swallowing the lethal green light. Fawkes was instantly enveloped in golden and crimson flame, plummeting to the ground like a meteor and collapsing into a silent ball of fire. Dumbledore's wand swept across his front in one fluid motion. The fiendfire that had been charging him was erased as if rubbed out by an eraser, vanished without a trace. Without pausing, Dumbledore tapped his wand toward the newly landed Voldemort. Voldemort felt as if struck by an invisible giant hammer and crashed to the ground. The ice-blue water net spell reappeared, tightening rapidly like living water and forming a rotating, flowing prison. Inside, a distorted dark shape thrashed against the walls, trying to tear free. Everyone stared, stunned that Dumbledore had imprisoned Voldemort. Then, boom, the water prison detonated from within. Countless droplets of magically charged water sprayed outward like high-speed shrapnel. Aurors were struck, screamed, and fell, grievously wounded. Through the mist, Voldemort's figure reemerged. He seemed largely unharmed, though drenched. His golden hair stuck wetly to his forehead, making him look disheveled. Rage burned harder in his scarlet eyes. At that moment, something else happened to the fiendfire canopy that had shrouded the sky. Remus and Rubus had tried to break through it and failed. They had been unable to breach that terrifying wall of fire. The canopy, which had been shrinking, suddenly began to fluctuate. Its edges trembled and, to everyone's alarm, started to expand again, as if something inside were frantically battering to break out. Dumbledore and Voldemort both stopped and looked up, faces grave. Then, without any thunderous blast or blinding light, the fiendfire canopy simply vanished, silent and abrupt. The scorched ground and flowing lava beneath it disappeared with it, as if they had never existed. Where the canopy had been, a figure now stood. Roger knelt half upright atop a black dragon, panting, a flying cloak whipping in the sea breeze. The dragon itself was worse for wear, one horn broken, its body lacerated, wings riddled with burned holes, struggling to stay aloft. Harry Potter was clutched in one of the dragon's giant claws, apparently unconscious. The Death Eaters and Aurors alike had not expected Roger to have emerged from the fiendfire alive. What froze everyone more was the other figure beside him, Salazar Slytherin. He matched the legends, an aged face like an ape's, a sparse, long beard hanging to his chest. His eyes were dark and dead, devoid of ordinary life. Most terrifying of all was the raw magical fluctuation radiating from him, a wave like a physical tsunami that swept across the battlefield. Its force was so great that even Dumbledore and Voldemort felt it as a lethal threat. There was no doubt now that the fiendfire canopy had been erased by Salazar Slytherin by some unfathomable means. Both sides, having been locked in mortal combat, fell utterly still. A tense silence settled as everybody, friends and foes alike, turned, wary and unanimous, toward that legendary presence, Salazar Slytherin. 96. The mystery of Slytherin minister Cornelius Fudge was utterly dumbfounded. Lord Voldemort's return alone was already a nightmare for the ministry. Now, impossibly, one of Hogwarts' founders, Salazar Slytherin himself, had seemingly reappeared. Slytherin had been the first to preach pure blood supremacy. With Voldemort back and now this, the news could not be worse. Fudge's mind raced in a selfish, practical direction. If he could capture the resurrection method Roger had used, and then outlaw and monopolize resurrection magic, restricting it to the ministry could field an endless army of Aurors. What would he fear then? A Dark Lord, a White Lord, none of them. The thought of absolute domination shone in his head. Dumbledore thought smaller, more personal. When he had first taken an interest in the dark arts, it had been in pursuit of power with Grindelwald. Later, his studies had been driven by a single aching desire to bring back his sister, who had died in an accident. He had long been fascinated by resurrection. In the specter before him, however, he saw something imperfect, not a true resurrection, but a phantom. This Salazar Slytherin carried fragments of will, memory, and soul, enough to speak and act, but not whole. Unlike a Horcrux, the remnant of soul and will was not rooted in this world but lingered on the other side, sustained by sheer malice and enormous magical power. What chilled Dumbledore most was that the thing exuded a pureness of evil that was almost inhuman. Its nature resembled a Dementor. A fragmented soul cannot sustain a full, balanced will. Positive feelings, the things that keep a soul whole, evaporate first. What remains is despair and hunger, hatred and cruelty. Dementors fed on joy for the same reason. This apparition, maintained by primitive malice and a vast reserve of magic, felt like that same kind of void. If Roger's method could be refined, Dumbledore thought, perhaps a true resurrection could be achieved. He turned his eyes to the great black creature that served as Roger's medium. Dumbledore's pupils narrowed. There were marks on its body, traces of an enchantment like Imperius, but subtler, more thorough. The most accomplished Imperio could twist a mind so deeply its victim would obey willingly even after the spell was lifted. The magic on this beast carried that same chilling, insidious quality. Roger's spells had been darker and deeper than anything Dumbledore had seen here before, each step closer to the forbidden abyss. If Roger had not been standing there, Dumbledore might have believed this was Voldemort's handiwork. Voldemort, for all his composure in public, was not calm. His red eyes fixed on the phantom of Salazar Slytherin, searching desperately for the faint echo of a familiar aura. The magic shared similarities with his own resurrection ritual, but was also different, rough, crude, yet displaying a potential and an artistry he had not expected. Where he had felt triumph at his own return, he now felt a sharp, jealous panic, as if something tracked him from behind, ready to overtake him. A thorn of fear pressed into him. If he could not destroy this threat now, what heights would this boy reach by their next encounter? Would he still be able to dominate him then? Voldemort's mind flicked to the prophecy he had partially heard. The boy in it, born at the end of July, matched Roger's records. Roger had thwarted him 3 times already and, in the Fiendfire Canopy, had survived situations that should have killed him. Compared to Harry Potter, Roger looked a far closer fit for the part of the prophecy Voldemort feared. The fear and urgency in him deepened. He wanted the prophecy's second half revealed, and this rival crushed immediately. When Dumbledore finally arrived on the field with reinforcements, Roger's taut nerves relaxed a fraction, and he let out a soundless sigh. In the desperate inferno of the Fiendfire Canopy, he had used a technique similar to Voldemort's, linking his will with the great black beast and drawing a phantom of Salazar Slytherin from the depths of the creature's memories back from the other side. The cost of summoning something from the other side, though, exceeded his expectations. Kneeling on the creature's back, pale as parchment, Roger used his life force and his source magic as fuel to anchor Slytherin's phantom in the physical world. Even with the beast as medium, the strain was crushing. He felt his life slipping away like sand through an hourglass. The phantom drained magic with a ferocity that left the black creature and Roger nearly empty. Roger grew so weak he might not even manage a simple Lumos. Knowing the state could not last, Roger made his choice. With the last of his strength, he raised a hand and pointed it directly at Lord Voldemort. Salazar Slytherin had been famed for his dark knowledge, legilimency above all. The phantom answered its summoner and turned toward Voldemort, unleashing a brutal, merciless flood of intent. Dumbledore recognized the assault for what it was, an ancient, violent form of legilimency so crushing it shattered minds. Once used, it was outlawed nearly as fully as the Unforgivable Curses and had been lost to time for a reason. It did not probe calmly. It smashed. The malice struck Voldemort and cut through his occlumency like the keenest blade, driving into his consciousness with naked, primitive destructiveness. The Dark Lord staggered as if stunned. He lost the sensation of flight and began to fall. But even this assault could not finish him. Voldemort, the greatest of living dark wizards, fought back, expelling the malign force and clawing his way back into the air. He did not linger. He had spent all his strength resisting, and a second assault while besieged by Dumbledore's forces could finish him. He retreated into the ranks of his Death Eaters. With a flurry of complex gestures, he traced a massive, intricate magic circle that flared to life beneath them, its dark glow swallowing the Death Eaters inside. The air torqued and shimmered like a pond struck by a boulder. A blinding black light erupted, and in the next instant, Voldemort and every Death Eater vanished. Roger's tenuous hold immediately collapsed when Voldemort fled. His sight went black. He felt himself fall and consciousness slip away. But Salazar Slytherin's terrifying, towering image did not vanish. It threw back its head in a chilling laugh, dissolving into a curling cloud of black mist that fled the scene. Dumbledore, Minister Fudge, and the others stared, faces stricken. What kind of monster exactly did Roger summon? 97. The price of becoming #1 in the world, St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. Roger felt as if he were surfacing from a long, heavy dream. His eyelids fluttered open, and it took a moment for his eyes to adjust to the light. He was in an unfamiliar bed. "Good afternoon, Roger," said a familiar voice nearby, Professor Dumbledore's, gentle but threaded with more than he let on. "Headmaster," Roger croaked, rubbing the sleep from his head as he took in the hospital room. Neat beds, crisp linens, the sharp, clean smell of antiseptic. "Where is Lord Voldemort?" Roger remembered the last thing before blacking out. He had risked that extraordinarily dangerous resurrection magic. To drag the dead back from the other side by sheer force of will could be a miracle if it worked. If it failed, it would drag the caster across instead. Thinking back, it was a stroke of luck that he and Sirius Black had returned. Whatever remained of Salazar Slytherin's consciousness had not tried to drag them under. "Rest easy. For now, everything has settled down." Dumbledore's voice was steady, but Roger noticed a different edge to him. Less of his usual soft benevolence, more sharp scrutiny. Around the bed lay scattered newspapers and piles of sweets, gifts, and bouquets. Clearly, many people had come to visit. "These were sent by your friends and admirers. Many of them are from the Ministry of Magic's Auror office," Dumbledore said, a twinkle behind his half-moon spectacles. "The higher-ups at the Ministry saw what you did. Sirius Black has been cleared. He's told people the full details of your battle, though the legal formalities will take time. Your reputation is rising fast within the Ministry. St. Mungo's is close to the Ministry, so it's convenient for everyone to come and pay their respects." "How is Sirius?" Roger asked, more worried about his friend than anything else. "Physically, he's recovering remarkably quickly, but—" Dumbledore's brow tightened and his face darkened. "His condition is unusual." Roger understood. In that desperate moment, he had used an improved version of the dragon transformation. The old spell had relied on simple memory modification. Roger's revision worked on the level of the will. At its core was not just a physical change, but the integration of one of Roger's will seeds. This was the deepest, most dangerous territory of transfiguration, permanent alteration at the level of the will. It was like dropping a drop of dense ink into clear water. The ink spreads and fundamentally stains the whole. That thorough change above the level of will meant the result wasn't affected by conventional human-to-wizard restoration charms. In Roger's mind, it was the perfect transfiguration. If the target cooperated, mobilizing their own will and magic, the effect could be achieved with far less effort. Sirius had cooperated completely. He knew he couldn't save Harry or escape Voldemort on his own. The result was astonishing. On a physiological level, Sirius Black had become a fully mature Hebridean black dragon while retaining his memories and his humanity. But such magic carried an immense cost. From the standpoint of magical theory, it bordered on a partly controllable, irreversible blood malediction. "He has only willingly transformed back into human form once so far," Dumbledore said, "and spends most of his time as a dragon. And—" his voice grew very serious. Hard to tell if it was helplessness or reproach. "He seems to have developed a strong taste for giant squids. He ate all the giant squids raised by the department for the regulation and control of magical creatures. They say he shifted back to human form then just so he could sneak into the department." Roger's eyes widened. The side effects were that intense? No wonder Dumbledore's face was drawn. He'd probably assumed Sirius had been struck by some malignant dark arts. After Roger outlined the mechanism, Dumbledore's expression softened slightly. At least it wasn't a true blood malediction. Sirius hadn't lost his humanity or his memories. He had integrated certain dragon instincts. "But Roger," Dumbledore lowered his voice and fixed him with a keen look. Your magic bears the shadow of Imperio. It is a method of control acting on the spirit, and it appears even more powerful and thorough. Most importantly, like the Unforgivable Curses, there is no counterspell. Dumbledore had checked. Deep within Sirius's consciousness, there lay an external will seed. Like a virus, it had infected and reshaped Sirius's sense of self, convincing him at the deepest level that he was a Hebridean black dragon. No spell Dumbledore cast could remove that seed. That also meant Dumbledore's influence over Sirius, an important member of the Order, had been significantly weakened. That was something he found difficult to accept. Roger met the headmaster's sharp gaze calmly and even smiled a little. Headmaster, magic itself is neutral, like a knife. Whether it's used for harm or good depends on the hand that wields it. A knife can wound or it can save. Dumbledore narrowed his eyes and shook his head slowly. That is not sufficient. We cannot pursue a right end by wrong means, Roger. Roger did not flinch. You know the circumstances. Voldemort stole power from death and used some vile magic to fortify his followers in short order. I'm sure you and the others have seen it. And above all, Sirius consented. At the time, it was our only choice. Dumbledore regarded him in silence, but his eyes were cold. That is still no excuse. Where the power to enslave others becomes available, evil grows. No one can withstand that test, including me. Roger thought of the original story, why Dumbledore had refused the Ministry's offer of the position of Minister for Magic. Dumbledore was no saint. In his youth, his views had been not dissimilar to Grindelwald's or even Voldemort's. The death of his sister had plunged him into remorse, and ever since he had kept that darker inclination tightly controlled. Dumbledore lived with a continual inner torment, wielding an enormous will to discipline his own worldview. It explained why his magic was so potent and why he could say, as he did, that death is but the next great adventure. For someone who had come to long for release from such pain, death might indeed look like freedom. Such was the terrible price of becoming the strongest, to hate the part of yourself that seeks strength, and then to use all the power of your will to bind it. 98, white wizard specializing in dark magic. Roger's smile deepened. That's why, he said with absolute certainty. He let his gaze sweep over the newspapers scattered on the floor, stooped, and picked one up. The obituaries listed more than 20 Aurors who had fallen in the recent battle. You see, even with superior numbers, they suffered terrible losses. I'm sure you already know that Lord Voldemort has mastered a form of dark magic that can rapidly amplify his power. His voice dropped, low and urgent. If we are to defeat him, we must match that change by whatever unconventional means it requires, whatever price it exacts. Dumbledore had been immensely helpful. One pillar of Roger's own magical theory had come directly from the headmaster's teaching. Roger loved Hogwarts, the library, the secure research spaces, the Weasley twins with whom he could talk alchemy, and easygoing classmates like Harry, Hermione, Wayne, Ron, and Neville. But Hogwarts was not indispensable to him. After that battle, the name Roger Lewis had echoed through the wizarding world. His achievements would secure him a place at Ilvermorny, Beauxbatons, or Durmstrang without entrance exams. He had options. He did not need to cling to Hogwarts or to Dumbledore. More than that, Roger wanted a more equal, more independent footing with Dumbledore, and he wanted the principal to understand it. He had little choice. Every spell he developed was fundamentally entangled with the Unforgivable Curses, Imperius, Cruciatus, and the rest. Sooner or later, his research would cross the line Dumbledore drew for the dark arts. If none of his spells had counterspells, wasn't that a strength? It was a thought straight out of dark arts reasoning, and Roger sighed to himself at how close it came to that mindset. Still, in his heart, he believed he was walking a different path, a white wizard, albeit one who specialized in the essence of dark power. Controlling his fate was better than letting others control it. To do so, he needed power. Look at the foremost wizard of the age. His strength did not come only from white magic. Dumbledore's own research into darker matters must have contributed enough to make even Lord Voldemort wary. They were alike in that way. Perhaps, he thought, those closest to you can sometimes be the most like enemies. Dumbledore was silent for a long moment, his blue eyes studying Roger over half-moon spectacles. Finally, he asked, "Then what of Salazar Slytherin?" Roger gave a frank account of his research. The spell was half finished and had been cast in desperation at a critical moment. The magic was far more complex than dragon transformation. It touched not only the realm of will, but the mysteries of the soul, both treacherous and difficult, and he had never expected to summon anything more than a residual image of Salazar Slytherin. But it was only a shadow, Roger emphasized. Anyone can see it wasn't a true resurrection. Completing the spell is extremely hard. In fact, it took the combined will of two people to barely manage what we did. The result resembled the ancient Norse summoning of heroic spirits or Eastern deity descent rites, not true resurrection. Still, he admitted, it pointed in a direction. Continued study might eventually lead to genuine resurrection. Indeed, a magic with broad prospects, Dumbledore said, nodding. There was curiosity in his face now, not displeasure. Could you give me the detailed notes? Perhaps I can offer some helpful suggestions. Roger assumed this would be a master class. He drew his wand and plucked a silvery strand of memory from his temple. An opportunity for the headmaster's personal guidance was rare, rarer still to have him join the research. The moment Dumbledore took the notes on the resurrection spell, he seemed to change, moving as lightly as a young man. With a flick of his wand, he vanished from the ward without so much as a goodbye. Roger had the sneaking suspicion that Dumbledore's true interest had always been this resurrection spell. No sooner had Dumbledore left than the next visitor arrived, Cornelius Fudge. The minister looked terrible, purple-rimmed eyes, his face gaunt with exhaustion. "Roger," Fudge said warily, "glad to see you up. While you were out cold these past 3 days, I've been run off my feet. Did you hear? Yesterday Azkaban fell. Every last Dementor defected to the one whose name we don't say. I sent extra guards, but we're clearly outmatched." He swallowed. "So we need new power, now." Fudge locked eyes with Roger in a look that said, "You know what I mean." "You're referring to?" Roger feigned ignorance. Fudge leaned in, his voice lowering. "That spell, the one that brings the dead back. It has potential. Difficult and costly, yes, but the Ministry can fund it. With it, we could build an undying army, couldn't we?" He hurried on, eager to reassure. "Don't worry, the Ministry will purchase the rights at a fair price. In fact, I've decided to name you senior advisor to the Ministry. You'll have full support for your research, as long as you give your full support to me." The emphasis on the last word was deliberate. Roger almost laughed. An undying army? More like an army of undead. The optics of the Ministry commanding a horde of the risen against Voldemort's Death Eaters would be horrifying. It might even make Voldemort look like the lesser evil. He shoved the absurd image aside. Fudge, not looking at him anymore, launched into complaints about political enemies. "You know the whole wizarding world is screaming for my resignation now that word of Voldemort's return has spread. In 3 days they've united, first time in my 3 years as minister." Roger hesitated. "Yet you haven't resigned. Sounds like your position's still secure." "For now," Fudge admitted, "I've persuaded Dumbledore to become senior undersecretary, though a few details remain, so my base is now the hybrid hawk faction." He sighed, a natural dove. He'd been forced into hawkishness by rivals. Roger chose his response carefully. "Minister, that resurrection spell won't meet your expectations. It's only half finished. It can't truly bring the dead back. I can't hand it over. However, I can design alchemical items to boost Auror combat power, results beyond anything you've imagined." Disappointment crossed Fudge's face. Ministers seldom let go of exclusive spells. But the second proposition lit his eyes. He'd seen Roger's flying cloak. Outfitting every Auror with something like it would dramatically increase their effectiveness. Fudge brightened as he pictured it. Roger had lain in St. Mungo's for 3 days before waking. In that time, the outside world had filled with rumors. Wild versions multiplied, but they agreed on the main leads. Sirius, Roger, and Harry had been delivered to the hospital by a swarm of Aurors. With so many Ministry witnesses to Voldemort's return, secrecy in Britain was impossible. Once the leaks were pieced together, the rough truth emerged. Without Fudge's usual editing, the reports were unusually candid. A prodigy, a savior, and a wrongly imprisoned convict had together witnessed Voldemort's rebirth, and the prodigy had dueled with him and actually driven him back. To many at the ministry, that made Roger Lewis the new boy who lived. The revived Daily Prophet assigned Rita Skeeter to a deep dive piece. She dug up the fact that Roger had already escaped Voldemort 3 times, compared with Harry's once, and so painted Roger as possibly the more experienced survivor. When news broke that Roger had woken, the 5th-floor corridor of St. Mungo's filled at once with the curious, the admiring, and the outright starstruck. Healers barred all visitors, but people crowded the window ledges, craning for a glimpse of him. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries was quieter than usual. With all eyes on Roger, Harry's ward saw few visitors until Roger was discharged. Halfway through the Christmas holidays, Ron and Hermione finally heard the news and ran to St. Mungo's in a panic. "Harry, you scared us to death!" Hermione burst into the room, her fear still trembling in her voice. Forcing herself to steady, she lowered her voice to a whisper. "It's horrible. We spent months living with a Death Eater." "Everyone's saying Professor Lockhart was really Peter Pettigrew and a Death Eater?" Ron blurted, eyes shining with gossip. "Come on, what happened?" Harry rubbed his still throbbing forehead. The kindly Professor Lockhart had been a Death Eater in disguise, and the truth stung. The one comfort was that Sirius Black had finally been cleared. He had never imagined the godfather he'd blamed could be innocent, while the real traitor was the war hero who'd been posthumously awarded an Order of Merlin. At last, he had true family, Sirius. Fighting the lingering pain, Harry told them everything he could. He'd been unconscious most of the time and hadn't seen Voldemort's return or the Death Eaters gathering in full, only flashes. Roger, Sirius in Black Dragon form, and Voldemort locked in battle. Hermione and Ron listened with bated breath, gasping at every danger. When Harry told them about Pettigrew's use of the Cruciatus, they nearly screamed. The healers had told him he was lucky he'd escaped the permanent soul damage that had ruined Neville's parents. Hearing that Voldemort had tried to kill Roger, Hermione clapped a hand over her mouth. "I was unconscious from fiendfire, but Roger saved me." Harry recalled the mythic fight, still looking stunned. "How did he manage that?" Ron blurted. "Roger beat you-know-who, of course." Hermione snapped, then shot Ron a glare when he looked pleased with himself. He hurriedly corrected. Right. Everyone's saying Roger's the real savior." He winced the moment it slipped out, glancing anxiously at Harry. Harry didn't care for the title. To him, savior was tied to his parents' murder, and he would gladly be rid of it. He nodded slowly. "I think he is. Remember first year? Roger stopped Voldemort's shade even then. Now that he's back, Voldemort still can't touch him." Harry had seen Roger duel Voldemort without ever losing ground. The image of Roger astride a black dragon, fighting the Dark Lord, still filled him with awe. That was how a prophesied hero should look. He was sure Roger could become the greatest wizard after Dumbledore. "I just hope the Dark Lord's defeated soon, so the magical world can finally know peace." As a Muggle-born witch, Hermione longed for a safe magical world. Ron, in one of his rare moments of grim reflection, said, "If you ask me, Hogwarts never should have started Slytherin House. Without a house churning out dark wizards, maybe there'd be no Dark Lord." The other 3 founders were nuts to let a house devoted to pure-blood fanatics stay open. Harry partly agreed. He knew the founders had different visions, but he still couldn't understand why they'd create a house that nurtured pure-blood supremacists. "Hogwarts, a history, says in the 10th century dark wizards were common," Hermione added. "The founders wanted children from those families brought into school, guided and educated, so they founded Slytherin." "But why call it Slytherin? What's the name supposed to mean?" Ron frowned. "No one knows. Maybe it was just random." Harry shrugged. The name's origin didn't interest him all that much. "Anyway, Voldemort's back. We need to get stronger fast if we're going to beat him." Ron's face went pale at the blunt reality. For a moment he couldn't respond. "What are you thinking?" Hermione asked sharply, sensing Harry already had a plan. Meeting their stares, Harry said firmly, "Roger knows a way to gain great power quickly. Sirius told me he tried it, became a dragon wizard, and he's incredibly strong." "But what's a dragon wizard?" Ron asked. He knew of light and dark wizards, but never a dragon wizard. Was it some kind of animagus? What did Roger have to do with it? He looked to Hermione for an answer, but she only shook her head. "Harry, I don't think you should chase power that way, she said earnestly. We have no idea what the side effects could be. There were countless quick paths to power in the magical world. The restricted section held more than a few. Most promised tricks or fleeting advantages. The strength Harry spoke of was different. Real power enough to stand against Voldemort. Such power always demanded a price. Across history, desperate wizards had tried everything. Foul rites that sacrificed to demons, perilous potions, deep alchemy, even Horcruxes. Each could give strength overnight. Time and again, history proved that what came cheap was paid for dearly in the dark. Perhaps their caution reached him. Harry drew a slow breath. I know you're looking out for me. He chose his words carefully. It isn't what you think. I just need to ask Roger. He's brilliant. He must know a lot of magic. I want to learn how to grow stronger, properly, step by step. His gaze hardened. I have to get stronger fast. I want to avenge my parents. The words fell like a stone. Hermione's lips parted. Ron's hand hung mid-gesture. In the sudden hush, that single vow echoed between them, heavy and unspoken. 100. Harry is a fighting machine. The Hogwarts Chamber of Secrets. After returning from St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries, Roger plunged straight into his laboratory and threw himself into designing alchemical equipment for Fudge. He could feel the minister's attitude shifting. Lord Voldemort's return might not be entirely bad news for the ministry. Once a full-scale wizarding war began, Fudge could reasonably style himself a wartime minister and centralize power. What was stranger still was how calm things seemed after Voldemort's reappearance. Aside from the attack on Azkaban, the Death Eaters had launched no large-scale operations. The dark wizards across Britain seemed to be holding themselves back. Public security, paradoxically, looked better than it had before. After the initial panic passed, life went on much as usual for many witches and wizards, aside from the occasional reports of Muggle attacks, which most of the magical community did not treat as critical. Inside the lab, Roger scribbled idea after idea on parchment. Shield hats, shield gloves, shield cloaks, double vision spectacles, portable swamps, magic rings, invisibility smoke bombs. He already had improvements in mind for the double vision spectacles, borrowing the will linking spell used in Voldemort's resurrection ritual. If the spectacles could connect wearers' wills, several minds could power a single spell, multiplying its strength. Naturally, this military-grade version would carry a steep price tag. The Shield series, built on the charms later developed by the Weasley twins in the original story, Roger planned to upgrade the ordinary Shield charm to a far tougher snake-scale armor charm. The magic rings would function as miniature wands, with a number of fixed spells baked in, disillusionment charms, invisibility, and so on. His most exciting idea, though, was the multi-casting wand. Voldemort's ability to cast multiple spells at once came from his split soul and divided will. Most wizards could not imitate that. Roger's alternative was to use runes to harden the magic sequence inside the wand itself. The caster would only need to channel power, and the wand would trigger several preset spells at once. Pseudo-multicasting. Imagine an Auror unit equipped with this gear. The shield line for top-tier protection, magic rings for utility, invisibility for infiltration, and a multi-casting wand to unleash concentrated firepower. Such a force could hold off a dozen Death Eaters, or make even Voldemort think twice. If deployed as organized units, the Death Eaters would stand little chance. The business potential was enormous. Swapping out fixed spell sets in a wand's core would feel like equipping new weapons, suddenly rendering opponents' tactics obsolete. This is a continuous golden industrial chain. Roger's eyes glittered. With his standing at the ministry, Dumbledore's influence, and his own growing reputation, founding an alchemy company to fund his research seemed inevitable. Harry Potter walked in just then. "You want me to help you get stronger?" Roger asked, surprised. He'd expected Harry to ask Dumbledore. Then he thought of Dumbledore, busy with the ministry, with Voldemort's return, and nightly experiments in the headmaster's office that had even startled a few professors with small explosions. "Yes!" Harry's voice was steady, fierce. Compared to the boy from the original sequence of events, this Harry carried a heavier burden. Voldemort had returned nearly 3 years early and had become more powerful and calculating. Harry needed strength, and urgently. There were many ways to get stronger, but none were simple. The quickest route, studying the dark arts, wasn't suited to Harry. In the original timeline, when he used the Cruciatus Curse on Bellatrix, the spell backfired because Harry couldn't derive pleasure from inflicting pain. Without the necessary malice, the curse had no real effect. Harry, upright and kind-hearted, lacked the cruelty needed for black magic. He was, in Roger's eyes, a born practitioner of white magic, a white wizard with a saintly constitution. Another route was creating a Horcrux, but Roger dismissed that immediately. Teaching Harry to split his soul would be unforgivable. Dumbledore would hunt him to the ends of the earth, and the consequences of soul-splitting were too monstrous. Dumbledore's respect for the soul was why he refused to use the killing curse on Voldemort, not to mention why murder was avoided at all costs. There was one more possibility: dragon transformation. If Harry agreed, Roger could attempt to turn him into a dragon wizard and leap his power forward overnight. But the outcome was wildly unpredictable. What kind of dragon Harry would become and how his personality might shift were matters of luck. If Harry turned into a savage dragon and couldn't be reversed, no one could guess how Dumbledore would react. "Roger, as long as I can defeat Lord Voldemort, I'll pay any price," Harry said, more earnest than Roger had ever heard him. His plea was almost desperate. Roger rubbed his chin and looked over the draft for the multi-casting wand he'd been sketching. Perhaps he could test the concept on Harry. Harry was practically a combat instrument, agile, lightning-fast in reflexes, with an exceptional combat instinct. He absorbed information and made split-second judgments more accurately than most. In the original timeline, his combat accuracy was off the charts. Examples piled up. In the Department of Mysteries, he held off 8 Death Eaters. In his 6th year, even when Draco openly attempted the Cruciatus Curse, Harry struck first with Sectum Sempra. Time and again, when pitted against Voldemort, Harry found a way to survive. He was a machine made for fighting. Arm him and make him the spearhead against Voldemort, and Roger's own life would be far easier. "All right, Harry," Roger said at last, a meaningful smile curling his lips. "I do have some ideas. Maybe I can help you. I can make you a powerful warrior, someone who can charge the front lines against Voldemort." Harry couldn't contain his excitement. He thanked Roger over and over, words tumbling out as he struggled to show how grateful he was.